Here.
Councilman Phillips.
Here.
Councilman Casella.
Here.
Supervisor Thurman.
Here, everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Now I have a motion to adopt the agenda, which is for this workshop session.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay, the motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none, motion passed. We have a tight, schedule, so I want to try to stick to the time frame. So Frederick, why don't you come up and provide a brief overview? I know, do we have it on the screen as well? I don't know. Okay. But just give the high level, and then, the purpose of this is to present some key financial information that is relevant or could be useful in our deliberations tonight. So Frederick, please, present it, but, try to, stick it to 10 to 15 minutes. Okay.
Frederick, we say
Yes,
the workbook first?
Yes.
yes, the financials first. I heard
The
somebody say.
PowerPoint.
The PowerPoint first?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't have navigation.
That's all right. Well, Frederick, why don't you just start talking a little bit, and then Tim will get on board.
So thank you very much to this capital planning workshop. We are going to look at some of our finances in terms of debt, in terms of grants, and also in terms of federal funding. So this is basically our debt principal outstanding amounts from all the funds. That is water, sewer, general fund, B fund, highway. And this is a trend for 10 years from 2012 to 2022, which is the current year. Next slide. And that is just a chart representing how the principal amount outstanding has been since 2012, basically in visual format. You see 2012, 24 million, it went up to 26.7. Then that's when last year when we got the 5 million, which was you'll see a breakdown of it later. In 2022, we had out, so it went lower than the 2021. 3 million. That is the B fund, water fund, highway, sewer. How much is outstanding at the end of 2022? So the general fund A, we have 6 million. Water funds combined 8 million. We have nothing in the B fund. Highway 9 million. Sewer 1.7 million. Next slide. This is now another way of presenting the information. 2022 principal amount 1.9, but we have interest also. So the total debt service commitment or debt payment to 2043. We have a total of debt outstanding at the beginning of this year, 25.1 million. 5 million of that is interest, total 30 million. Next slide. And this is just the table from 2022 current year all the way to the last year, which is 2043. So this is 10 years from 2021, that is 9, and then the last row is just all years. Next slide. So one of the requests was to present how much left unused. Last year we got a bond of 5.3 million, 750,000 for improvement of the parks, highway equipment 750, resurfacing various town roads 2.6 million, and we used 1.4 is going to be utilized this year. 22. Improvement to the highway buildings 1.2 million, which used, and then we got a bond and special note of 1.1 million. And the cumulative amounts of money we have used so far from the time the project started, and this is basically just the engineering design and a little bit of attorney fee. So 310,000 have been supposed to move forward so that requests for proposals are set so that be appointed. So we have 844,000. Team is going to present the grant portion of this commitment from the EFC and the total project cost. So we'll million here. The next slide. This is the American Rescue Plan Act funds. There was a request to present information about how much we received in the summer, which was 1.1 million. We are due to receive the equal amount this summer. Total awarded to the town of Wappinger, 2.2 million. Next slide. There was also a request about what this money is. You can use it to replace lost revenue that was caused by the COVID pandemic during the 2 years. In the rules, and now they're saying there's a standard allowance can be used without using a revenue loss calculation formula. I want to go this route because we know that for the town of Wappinger, our in 2020 and 2021, if you think about the sales tax, the mortgage tax, and I am sure the federal government would want documentation when we are claiming use of their money, how we have spent it. Another area is to make premium payments to essential workers. Hiring of up to 7.5 more employees. And I think the area where I think we could really use this money for our town is the investment in water or sewer projects. We already have water and sewer projects going on. Some of them, the residents may not be able to finance in terms of taxes at the end of each year. So I was thinking that this is the area that really we should use. We should think about or debate using that money for. And also for modernizing broadband infrastructure and cybersecurity. Next slide.
Just a quick question for you.
Yes.
So of the 2.267 million in total over 2 years, we've got 1.133 this year. Does it have to be shovel-ready projects starting in April of 2022? Do we need to identify projects within the next month or two in order to qualify? Because I know we got the money in already, but do we have to spend it? Is there a time period we need to have to spend it within?
The first requirement is we need to make a report by end of April this year about how we have spent the money, and if we have not, how we are going to spend it. I think we need to let them know in writing that A, we are thinking of spending it in this way, or B, we have spent it this way. So one way or the other, we have to make a return to the federal government by the end of April. And then the next report will be due 1 year later, so 2023, okay. April.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide. So we may not use the funds for general infrastructure, for highway, bridges, transit, ports. We may not also use the money to deposit into the pension fund or to offset tax revenues if we did not get property taxes that we anticipated getting. Although this one should not be affecting us because whatever we budgeted for, we get it in full from the county. Also, it can not be used for debt service payment. Next slide. Fund balances, I think this is going to be important for us in our discussion today. This is just a summary of our fund balances end of 2021. And this information I presented last time. A Fund 1.6, Parklands, the last time was 432, but then when I went back to the minutes, I think there was an $100,000 allocation for that the board approved so that we can use it for to repair the parks that were flooded. So that I decided to offset that amount, about 93,000, because we had used 6,000. And
So we should take a look at that, because within the 332,000, I know you took out 93,000
yes,
for the
yes,
money we approved, 100,000, which we
Yes.
spent 7,000 last year.
yes,
I think that really comes out of fund balance. I don't think that should come out of Parkland Trust. And originally, that money was in the A Fund. I know we've moved 7113 or whatever it is, 30, over to the B Fund. So we should take a look at that and see if the money really belongs there. Because what we're doing is we're depleting the Parkland Trust Fund, and I'm not so sure that that 93,000 should come out of here. And I know that you're going to identify that on a future chart, but we should talk about that, because, again, I don't believe that should come out of Parkland Trust. I think it should come out of fund balance.
And then it's reimbursed the fund balance when we receive.
Correct, because it's basically FEMA money we're trying to
Yeah, that's-
recover.
yes.
So
yeah.
at some point in time, we'll reimburse, as the supervisor said, A or
Right.
B fund, wherever we take it out of, but I think that's what it really should
And
come
I
out
think
of.
you're also right, given the amount of expenditure that we have laid out to FEMA so far, it's not that significant. Steve will also mention this if he has time. So far, we have only claimed about 4,600 based on the debris that was removed from the parks and the labor and the use of truck.
But we had submitted,
Yeah.
for over $80,000 in
Right.
reimbursable funds,
Right.
So,
But,
Steve can talk about the debris issue, so.
Yeah. Highway 3.4 ambulance and so on and so forth. Breakdown of the water funds there, 10,000, 8,000. United Wapinja Water has the largest amount, 1.4. And then the sewer funds there, United Wapinja Sewer District, 2.9 million. A total of 15 million combined.
And of course, Frederick, not all that water or sewer funds is what we intend to spend, because I think we agreed, subject to more discussion on the board, but to hold in a reserve in case there were some unforeseen damages or
Right.
what have you, right, Al?
Correct, that's
Yeah.
right.
Next slide. That's it? Oh, okay. So this is the Parklands Trust Fund breakdown that we were talking about. So the only thing I added from the last presentation was the last item, allocate 100,000 for repairs for parks. And again, as Alas mentioned, he believes that that should come out of the A Fund and not the Parkland Trust Fund. And again, even if we were to spend it, we expect FEMA reimbursement of whatever amount we have spent to repair the parks. Next slide. Oh, that's it.
You want to go to the spreadsheet, or?
Yes, let's look at the spreadsheet.
Just one issue with respect to the ARPA funds, I just looked it up. The final guidance issued January 22nd says that all funds must be obligated by December 31, 2024, and spent by December 31, 2026.
Okay, that answers, I think, Al's question. Thanks, Jim.
Yep.
So we have some time, that's good.
This is another chart that has all the debt that the town has. If you scroll up to the left-hand side, the first column, or the second column rather, is the one that we issued last year in October, the 2021 bond. And that is the one amounting to 5.3 million. And then we have the 2020 bonds, 2018 bonds, 2018C, 2018B, and so on and so forth. If you go to the next workbook, the one titled Interest, it shows you the total interest amount, and then we have the third workbook, which has the total principal and interest combined. Yes, so at the bottom there, that is now the total for each fund, how much interest will have been paid by the end of the repayment period. So of all the funds, the interest that would have been paid is 5.2 million. And then the next workbook is the total debt service, which is now the principal on column 1, interest on column 2, and column 3 is the principal plus interest. And then the percentage debt that is would have been payable, like for example, 2036, if we have paid that, we would have paid 93% of our total debt. By 2043, assuming that we don't incur any other debt, we would have paid 100% of the debt. The next one is the long-term debt.
So the one good thing about here is if you look over the next couple of years, right, we're going to take roughly $350,000 to $400,000 off the balance sheet, right? If you look at principal interest, so if you took the total for 22, 23, 24, again, we should be taking some money off, although we're going to add some money back in when some of those other bonds that, we've got approved.
Right.
So do we have any idea what the net would be? So in other words, we're going to take off about $400,000. How much more do you think we're going to add over the next couple of years? Do you know? If you don't know, it's just,
So once we know for sure, what we normally do is we have all these amounts, and then with the help of our financial advisor, we decide on the period of probable usefulness. Say one project is 15, the other one is 15, and the third one is 25 years. So what he does is get a weighted average period of probable usefulness. And then, so out of those three, you could say, okay, the average is 18.3 or 18.5. And now that is the period over which the bond is spread. And then depending on the interest rate, that's how we decide how much. So he might decide that, okay, maybe we are having some issues or not, maybe let's say 2023. So he decides that that year we are not going to allocate principal on that debt and so on. So we have to know for sure exactly what we want to do, and then we send him the information, and then he says, okay, this is what is available, this is what the interest is, I think is going to be. And then we have those schedules, and then we add them into whatever we have here. The next one is the bond anticipation note. Now, this is the one that was taken, it wasn't long-term, it was a note. So we can renew this for up to 5 years. So what is going to happen that in October, it's going to mature, so we have to either issue another note to redeem this, or issue a long-term note. And then there's also the portion of, because this is a project that was 5.5 million, and 40% of that was to come from EFC, which was about 2.4, and the rest was to be bonded. So we have bonded 1.1. So the rest then has to be bonded because it's a project that has to be awarded sooner or later. And the concern is that the number of residents in that district, there are about only 137. And it's going to be a big, big hit already. They've been, complaining about their taxes. Some are calling, asking how long is the bond going to be, and it's going to be a long time. So,
So, Frederick and Jim, then some of the ARPA monies could be used for this
Exactly.
project, right?
Right.
And
Right,
particularly
sewer
in,
is very-
to help defray some of that.
right.
The other thing too
Exposure.
is sewer, I believe, the bond can be 40 years,
Right.
up to 40 years.
And we did get the WQIP grant,
Right.
that was other part of the finance calculation.
Yeah.
Right, if it's taken on its
And
own,
we can still apply
Yeah.
for,
Some
Another
additional
grant,
grants. Right.
we'll see.
And then, the federal infrastructure funding
Right.
is still floating out there.
And I think, when we're looking at, later on discussion, particularly under sewer and water, looking at how we might use some of the ARPA monies, we have two principal sewer plants that have to be decommissioned. The other one, which we'll talk about later, is also we have notices of violation, for that. And we've gotten, and Tim will talk a little bit about it, grant money to start doing some engineering look at. But I think as we look at ARPA, we don't have to commit tonight, but we certainly should be looking at, using some of that money toward those two projects. And particularly Wildwood, which is more urgent.
Have we figured out what the net to a residence would be without any assistance yet? Or is this still too early to figure that out?
it's,
I think that was originally in the map planning report,
right,
so I believe the original map planning report addressed that.
Okay, and then obviously, the length of time of the bond makes a difference as well.
Right.
And the actual project cost.
Yeah,
right?
the cost
Right.
over the inflation.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything's going up there from the original 5.5 million, so
oh,
just have to
So
see where it lands.
Jim, maybe before we get to that, you could take a look and see if you can find the original map plan report. I don't know. Well, you're a great database.
I just don't want to miss this up.
Right, no, that's fine. I know you
Tim,
can, when we get to it.
I want to stop there, and I don't know whether anybody has any question. Tim, you wanted to?
You want to jump to my sheet now, or?
No,
Yeah.
I think I'm done now.
Yeah, go ahead, let's jump to yours, Tim.
All right. Stand by.
Thank you, Frederick.
So I'll pick up sort of on the number side, and then I have some graphics to show. So this was the capital project spreadsheet that we kind of culminated over the course of the last 3 years anyway. And, as we work through these projects, it's kind of segregated by Carnlat, facilities, parks, water, sewer, and within these categories, we pulled out projects that we kind of, Frederick just talked about. Some of the parks projects you guys bonded for. We've got grants for Wildwood Sewer. We got a grant for the water interconnect. And so what we did was we looked at this plan as like a 5-year capital plan. And we're in year 1 as 2022. And year 1 was pretty much defined by the projects that the board chose to fund, either through a bond or that we have grant monies or what have you. So we kind of tabulated these numbers. These are, I would trust obviously Frederick's real-time numbers, and we'll revisit those that we have tonight versus what we have populated in here as to what the active 2022 capital project list is. But the intent of this whole exercise was to start thinking about year 2, 3, 4 down the road, right? So the further we go down the road, the less probably viable a project may be or considered to be. What we have on our horizon, in speaking about grants, is, the town recently got, as supervisor said, engineering planning grant for Midpoint Park. That's a $100,000 grant to do basically a sewer study. That's the first step in basically laying the groundwork to what's the solution for Midpoint Sewer. We have to look at I&I studies within, but also design options as to where that sewage would ultimately go. Would it go to Tri-Muni? Would it go to like East Fishkill or another community? I mean, that's going to be all part of that engineering planning grant study. I'm going to have to close out of this and get another active. I can't. Relative to the grants, so I just spoke about Midpoint I&I. We have the WQIP, which is the Wildwood Sewer. That WQIP funding is going to go toward your construction costs for Wildwood. So that sets the stage for the next move. We're waiting for final approval from DEC on our design, and then once we get that, we can go to bid. You already have the grant. It was like a $1 million grant, I believe, for,
No, that's right.
no, yeah, $1 million for the WQIP. And that's in addition to the one that you have already, which is the 2.4.
That's right.
So that's almost half, Frederick, of what, we were saying. It's a little more than half of what we were saying the anticipated project cost was.
But since, it's a 40%, with some of the inflationary growth in construction, I think, no, but we are in good position, especially since we got that additional $1 million, grant that came in.
And then we've also been actively achieving awards on community development block grants. We did Spook Hill Park, the ADA bathrooms. We did Robinson Lane with the ADA bathroom, working with Steve and Parks on both of those projects. We're starting the groundwork on the new community center. That's ADA access at Carnwath. I mentioned the IMG grant with the Village Water Interconnect.
And we just closed on that, so now
We got the closing document, so we're actively working on the design as we speak.
and we'll discuss that a little bit more during the later portion.
So the local waterfront revitalization program, LWRP, we've submitted on 2 recurring openings, and neither one of them really got awarded. Working with Scott Williams, we're trying to figure out what is it that we need to do, but a lot of it has to do with the relative pool funding and the region that the funding covers. And I think if we looked at the 2021 pool,
One main reason we didn't get it. Peekskill took most of the funding to deal with the economic impact of the decommissioning of the power plant. So, most of the funds went to them this year.
so we talked about the Midpoint EPG study, but we know that Fleetwood is next on the DEC's chopping block in order to come and look at us in terms of violations. So we need to always keep our eye on the horizon. We basically got Wildwood under control in terms of grant funding and design and a plan. Midpoint's next in terms of, inception. And the final thing is, we need to look ahead toward Fleetwood. I had worked with Tamo and Mike Tremper a while ago, and we have a couple hot spots, if you will. They're older systems throughout the town that might be worth considering for I&I kind of investigations, including Rockingham, Kent Road, Pondview, and Brown Road. These would fall possibly under the ARPA monies, something to consider.
And that, without going into great detail, is very relevant because of the impact on tri-municipal. And, Tim, you maybe just summarize just very briefly what the discussion was the other day with the state authorities.
So we all know that this past summer, we had a very, very wet summer. In broad terms, it was probably a minimum of 12 inches of rain surplus on top of our normal summer rains, and these triggered exceptionally high flows from time to time at Tri-Muni, and basically there was a high flow notice violation issued by DEC, and I believe the EPA is involved in terms of following up with that high flow notification. And it's the old adage, things flow downhill, so it starts at the plant, although they start to look upstream, and they're really looking into each municipality what their contracted flows are, the contracted flow agreements, and then they're gonna correlate that to rainfall data to see if there is, in fact, a violation that could be pinned to a municipality, so.
Based on our analysis, and Jim can go in detail, when you look at it spread out over a year, as far as Wappinger's flow is, we're in good shape, overall. But I think that, as Tim mentioned, in order to look at making sure that finger isn't, or several fingers aren't pointed at us really, then some consideration of ARPA monies to do the I&I, studies, whether it's these or some others, might be valuable, and certainly I think will help defray some of the, costs that may be attempted to be charged back to us under the tri-community agreement.
So one of the issues in the notice of violation was it wasn't necessarily an aggregate flow.
Right.
It was that the overflow caused solids to be deposited into the river. So technically, the violation is certain solids coming from the plant, not the overall
Right.
flow from the plant, but the solids that came out of the plant were a result of the overflows. So,
Well, in any event, we're on the radar, so we
Yes.
need to,
Yeah, and I think it will be money-wise spent, whatever that money may be, to look at some of the I&I costs, over,
and
that
also,
are top priority.
DEC is looking at tightening some of the permit
Right.
restrictions with respect to chlorine and some of the other things. So to the extent we reduce,
Yeah, further phosphorus, phosphate, that
right,
sort of stuff.
so to the extent we reduce the flows,
Right.
it would be less expensive to do the treatment at the plant under the more restrictive guidelines, which haven't been given to us yet, but they're certainly on the
Right.
way.
and also, what it's gonna boil down to is a capital improvement project at Tri-Muni, whether it's dictated by these new permit
Right.
limits and/or some upgrades or modifications, but the flair of the conversation at the end was it wasn't looking like these improvements are slated to expand the capacity of Tri-Muni. It's really to fine tune and get it, operating in accordance with the regs. And then really the capacity is inferred to come from the reduction of I&I, and that falls back to the plant.
And we've had some very good success with I&I, such as at the pavilion and that, project, both the CPL and Mike Tremper have worked with. One other thing I mentioned as far as the financial aspects of this, if you take the village water interconnection, that while the grant money has closed, but the project is intended to be 1/3 grant money, simply, said, 1/3 grant money, 1/3 village, and 1/3 us. So that means that we'll have to look to that funding for that additional third, how we might come up with that. We don't know where the village is getting there, so that may or may not happen, but for us, we'll have to look at about $1 million.
Dick, just back to the question that was raised before regarding the Wildwood. So the map plan and report for the, what's called the 202B improvement, originally it was estimated that for 30-year bond with an assumed interest rate of 4%, big assumption nowadays. Total estimated cost increase for a typical single-family residence with one benefit unit would be $232, including the grant reductions. If the grant reductions are not included, then the cost increase would be approximately $595.
Right. So I think, how we can perhaps reduce that 595, with our, construction, cost, ARPA, that would be the big thing,
And then
to reduce.
for the annual cost for a user in Wildwood, including the current operating expenses plus the additional cost, was $780 without a grant, $1143. I'm sorry, $780 with the grant, $1143 without the grant. So that would be the typical annual cost to a user in the district.
So that $1 million grant cut the additional cost in half almost.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we,
Over.
like you said, put funds to it, it would reduce it again for,
Yeah, I mean, it's 40%.
40%.
Yeah, that WQIP really sealed the deal, in my opinion.
Yeah.
We had applied for it twice and
Yeah,
didn't get picked up.
Really did. Thanks to CPL, Scott, we did a great job in getting that additional funding. Actually, we've made out extremely well so far with grant funding. although I've been disappointed in not getting some, as Tim knows, but overall, it's been
Can't get them all.
quite good. We can't get it all, but we've done well, and more to come. But I think we have to really look at those issues. My bigger concern is that of Midpoint Park, because of the fact that the construction costs will probably be the same, or similar to what Wildwood would be.
Probably more.
Could be
depending
more
where
if
we
we
go.
take it down to Tri-Muni. If
Right.
we go work out something with East Fishkill, then it's maybe comparable, but it's a smaller residential base, for that. So we have to make sure we don't, that we keep that in mind, when we're looking at funding, because we have no choice. We have to do something with decommissioning that plant. And to rebuild it, it's 20 million or something, too?
It is, yeah.
If we could even meet their requirements
That's
for
just it.
rebuilding it, that's
You
the
don't know
problem.
what the end result's gonna be. It's not gonna stay the same. Other water considerations, we talked about maybe running a line from, the back property through the nature preserve here to feed the town hall and ESB. I mean, we have some water quality.
And we can discuss that when we come to that. But I think, do you have anything else more on financial numbers?
Not on the financial.
Okay, so then when we come to each segment, then we'll talk about that more.
Hey,
Okay?
Tim, just real quick, with the rising costs, especially, I'm sure piping is skyrocketed. Do you have any idea, ballpark
I
percent?
had a Teams meeting today that I want to recircle to all of our suppliers to see where we're at. I mean, in general, we're seeing 30 to 40% on a project markup, maybe 5% on labor. The big one is like fuel surcharges are just coming out of
Right.
the woodwork on stuff, so it's right now a moving target.
Okay.
And some of the other things like we'll talk about the highway, but getting some of these like pre-engineered buildings, from a approved shop drawing, which is like a technical document that, yes, this is the shoe that fits. It's like 46 weeks out to delivery. So you're almost talking like a year before a major product can
Well, speaking of highway, why don't we move into that? That's next discussion topic as far as the highway garage is concerned, and the fact that we did bond that, Tim, we've talked about what might be the elements of that building and grounds remodification, so.
So can I kind of do an audible here because
Sure.
my slide deck isn't exactly in line
Go ahead,
with,
please.
So, we prepared this, anyway, can we deal with the sidebar there? Or do I
Sure.
need to read it? So this is what we just talked about in terms of the grants, I won't really re-dive into this, but, we did talk about what's out there as potential. We did the EDR grant, Dick, with the sewer and the connection with East Fishkill with some of the interconnects.
And they're working on, East Fishkill is working on kind of finalizing their preliminary engineering, look at it. So we'll be getting back, hearing from them, I think, with the possible further discussions on that soon. Of course, we are going to have a meeting with Fishkill, East Fishkill, coming up, real soon on joint projects, so.
So then getting into our current infrastructure projects, I talked about the highway garage, we had a whole master plan of all the design elements for the site. And then what we've been really focusing on is the, where you can see my mouse, this 3-bay garage on the end. It's gonna be the mechanics shop, 3 bays, one houses a lift. I'm pushing my design team to have like the documents ready for this piece, like by the end of March. We were
Okay.
trying to get February, but we got hung up on
Did we ever get the geotechnical evaluation back yet? Because we had paid out $5,700
Yeah,
before.
we have the report. and
That came out okay from the soil
Yep.
testing? Okay,
So we
good,
have that.
thanks.
And then Spook Hill, there's several design phases out relative to Spook Hill, looking at the big picture stuff. Excuse me. We just finished, like I mentioned, with Steve and the Parks crew is, getting the restroom and the lot improvements going. We have phase 1 fitness area stacked up. There'll be some better graphics coming up. But, you know, the bigger thing was a walking track and the additional play areas and things, sorry. Wildwood Sewer we spoke of, Midpoint.
So-
Farm,
Can I just ask a question on the Sweet Hill? Because we were going into phase 2 next, correct? Where you got the track and everything else? What is the cost of that right now? Is that somewhere, 185, 200,000? And can we get any grant money or anything? Are you looking to do any grant applications there? Is that
we
any
have the
money on that? Are we-
CDBG, the monies that we have, I think, you know, we had an intermediate step, this phase 1A, which was like 139,000 for some playground apparatus, but the track and everything, that whole deal was like 600,000, like the whole ball.
So the county had indicated to us, and they haven't changed their position, that with a year or two in between, which is what we had, of course, we have to complete phase 1, so they can see that, then, they would seriously consider some additional grant, funding, somewhere probably in the range of 100 to 200,000 from the county, grant
Right, 'cause we
program.
already got the 100,000.
Yeah, but an
Once done with
additional
that.
100 to 200 is a possibility, no guarantee, but we have to complete phase 1 and then get a good estimate and
Phase 1.
analysis for phase 2.
Yeah.
But
So,
phase 1, Steve, we're jumping around a little bit, but that's
Yeah.
fine. What's your estimate of completing the building? You've been working on that, your team's been working on it during the winter, correct?
Well, we actually
some degree.
had to suspend
Okay.
most work there during the winter because the temperature, it's an unheated building, and a lot of the work is outdoor. The materials that we need to work with don't work in these temperatures, so once the weather breaks...
Once we got the, sub...
Right, once the weather breaks, gets up in the 40s or above.
Because I know Sal had been working in there,
Yes.
on the team for a while during
Right,
the
right.
early winter.
There has been some progress, but it's been slow. And then the other contention is the vinyl materials for the finish work on the out exterior. That's been tough to get a commitment on when they'll be delivered.
Okay. So once the fall occurs, then you'll be able to get
Yeah,
back there. and
yeah,
forth
once we
and-
get consistent temperatures above 40, then, we can get in there and start getting
Any
that.
idea when you think you might have it completed, phase 1, totally? I mean,
Again,
I
it's
know a lot of
gonna-
it says
It's going to
that it's-
depend on
when
when
you
the
get the
temperatures
vinyl.
come up and the availability of the materials that we need.
Can you start phase 1A, or do you have to finish phase 1 first?
I'm not familiar with the different phases.
So they were talking about, I guess, putting in some of the recreational stuff.
Right, I haven't
playground
really
stuff.
been involved in that other than
Okay.
to get the pad prepared for it. And I did happen, I met with them, but haven't seen the details since then.
I'm just wondering if we
I
can
think-
kind of start the second part, because I think most of the work he's got to do is outdoors now in the building and stuff. So can you do that kind of independent on 1A?
Well,
Or
I
you-
think,
or-
yes, it can be, except to where there's going to be an interconnection. But I think we have to really get back to this real quickly. There's been some changeovers in the people, the committee. We have to, I think, jumpstart that out
Okay.
during really the next month, so we can get, including the plan for the track, the exercise area, for universal access, which is the main theme of that, athletic, exercise complex. So that, we need to, I think, jumpstart, and get
Yeah,
that
because we
going
did
right
make,
here.
a beautiful presentation. I think Randy and a
Right.
few others made a
Yeah.
beautiful presentation, but I think at this point in time, residents are like, okay,
Right,
so,
yeah, exactly.
we're going to get the stuff done, et cetera, so
So on that, there was state bid pricing for some of the components of
Correct.
that, if you recall, and the pricing was gonna be good till, I'll have to find out, I forget when it was, March or April, it might have been March, that you needed to enter into a contract. Architects also showed, remember, like
Right.
some cost savings where if the community did like the mulch and stuff, and I think they were talking about making a memorial out of part of that, one of the meetings, remember, so.
Yeah.
We need to dust that off and make sure the pricing, we understand the pricing is gonna expire, because, I forget what the percentage increase was, but it's gonna go like another 5%.
Right.
How is their fundraising going, that committee?
Well, that's part of the issue that's kind of dropped off the radio waves. That's why I raised it right now. We have
Yeah.
to go take that, jump start it. I think there's been changes of people moving in and out and what have you. So I'd say over the next couple of weeks, we need to jumpstart that.
Yeah, especially if Tim's saying the prices are good till
Yeah.
March, probably into March, we're
Right.
gonna have to really jumpstart
I'll
this thing
find out.
and
Right.
move ahead with this.
Yeah.
So otherwise, they're gonna go up 30-40%, and then. Okay.
So then on my list, Wildwood, Midpoint, we talked, Carnwath, we did the roof repair, the temporary roof repair on the Manor House, and then the other scope is the ADA Community Center project, which we were awarded a CDBG fund. In your packets are just two color photos with QR codes on the corner, so if you like that kind of stuff, you can scan it and it'll bring you into 3D imagery, and it's a virtual tour inside each of the buildings, each of the rooms.
That's an amazing tour. Do you have that tonight?
I have stills because
Okay.
it's gonna crash. Like
All right, we
I tried to
didn't,
do.
you know, we really don't have that per se to discuss, you know, tonight because we have these other projects. And first and foremost, I think on the list was the highway garage. Do you have any separate slides, Tim, on that?
I just have like for
Okay.
architectural rendering, so this is like where our team is today. We've got the fit out of the garage, we've got the renderings. Again, we're trying to do some minor improvements to the existing facility while accommodating the new one. While our master plan had, you know, all these different work components, some of which we were considering to have town forces do during off times, we needed to look at as if there ever is an off time, right, Steve? You know, basically our progress is moving forward, and as I said, for the highway garage facility, we wanted to have at least this 3-bay garage ready to go to bid.
So do we need to go out and get a new estimate? Because right now, we've got $1.25 million approved, assuming there's a 30 to 40% increase, right, in order to do exactly what you have out there. Do we now need to increase the amount we bonded?
Well, I purposely.
So when's the next time, I guess, is what I'm asking, is when can you get a more accurate estimate?
Well, I purposely only focused on this scope instead of all the scopes around the site.
Okay.
Because this is a priority in hopes that it's gonna come in under that. But once we get the final docs, we can run it by and get an estimate.
But the other thing that I've mentioned before that I think we still need to look at, especially in light of our significant investment in trucks and vehicles, is the wash bay, Tim. You know, I think that we really need to look at it because with the salt around here, you know, those truck bodies, you know, rust out, you know, real quick. And I know, you know, a couple of our mechanics, you know, stress the importance of getting a wash bay in there, you know, above, before anything else other than the main building with a lift. So,
And speaking of that, too, they're also looking for another snow truck,
I know.
so another $250,000.
Right.
So things we need to consider as part of our 5-year capital plan with Frederick and the team.
Right. So I think if you look at that and then this garage, you know, bay, and then get us revised numbers as soon as
Well, it's
possible.
really
so.
making this a priority because it was
Right.
stated that the existing lift is probably, doesn't have
No.
another year's worth.
No, maybe even 6 months if you look at it, you know, without putting at risk our people, so
Okay.
that, and the wash bay,
I agree.
because we want to preserve these trucks and the other vehicles that we have.
Last time we talked, that pole barn was iffy at best. Do we have any updates on that?
No, we've just been focusing on getting this mechanics bay. I mean, right now, it's gonna become, you know, what is the code red? And right now, that isn't the code red, and it's not being like considered yet.
Right.
Okay.
I just think if we try to take too big of a bite, we're gonna choke. So I'm trying to keep things moving in a priority sense here.
Yeah, because one of the things we gotta look at, as Chris just mentioned, we're gonna have some expenses that Steve, I guess, gonna present later on, were improvements for the barn. You're looking
Right.
at almost $60,000 worth of improvements.
Right.
Again, different priorities, but we need to take that in consideration if we're thinking about doing an extension up at the highway garage, potentially to do, you know, something for buildings and grounds. So I know your first priority is to get the bay done, but we should also think about that too, because it could be an opportunity for us to maybe do something up there and build an entirely new.
Well, you know, in
So
fact, you know, that's why we have the barn on here, and maybe, Steve, it's a good point, just for you to cover the barn, you know, just give us an update on what you see
Because I
is
think right now they're getting the trucks washed someplace else.
LaGrange.
Right. So they're still being serviced, you know, to get that salt and everything off.
But I
No,
don't.
I agree with you.
But I
I
don't
think-
believe that all the trucks are going there. I heard
Well-
where they're washing it with a hose.
Maybe
up
they should
at the
then.
ground.
I don't
Yeah.
know, but
That's something we
at
can
least
look at.
there's a solution temporarily,
Correct.
you know, and
Yeah,
I
if they
agree, we
follow.
need a wash. But if you have a barn that's,
Well, it's, Steve, why don't you just stand up and talk about the barn right now? Don't talk
Yeah.
about the parks and other facilities, but the
Right.
barn.
The barn, I believe, was built sometime between the 30s and 40s. It was an old dairy barn. The floor is at multiple levels by design so that everything would flow to the center to be pushed out. There was also a track for a barn cleaner that's been filled with concrete. A lot of this concrete was mixed in place. It's in poor condition, it's crumbling, it's cracked, it's all different levels, and I've got a 7-foot ceiling height. It's very tough to work in. I don't have a heated area to repair vehicles or machines. You know, I put down the estimates here to repair the roof that's leaking again, and the floor is, you know, between $55,000, $60,000, but I question whether that building is worth putting that kind of
Right.
money into.
Correct.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going with it.
Yeah, it's still an old barn, it still has problems after you put that money into
I
it.
think that at least looking at it, my gut feel is it's not worth putting a lot of money into. But Tim, you know, have you guys looked at, you, Malcolm, and so forth, what that, is it salvageable? Or is it something we need to
We
put?
haven't looked at it, it's on our list, but, you know, I trust Steve's judgment in the low ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, it
Right.
serves a purpose for us. We're very grateful to have it. I am able to do some stuff in the shop area, out of the weather. But, you know, in the wintertime, it's very tough for me to repair vehicles, especially with the temperatures we've had. It really doesn't suit the needs that we have today versus what, you know, when things started here.
Is there another location? If we were to tear it down and rebuild, is there some other place that's more centrally located that you would be able to? Because you also still have equipment out at Carnwath too, right? You have.
We use that for
I know you
seasonal
use it for
storage, and that
Carnwath.
was something I wanted to
Yeah.
bring up with you. We are in dire need of storage area here.
Right.
Both for records and equipment that the town owns. And, you know, that's something that we need to explore at some point.
So that's why I'm raising it. I think, you know, do we have to look at some sort of new facility?
The ideas that
would-
I have had, we do have some space at our location that's unused and could house another building, at least the size of what we have, if not bigger. There is the building that used to be used by the water and sewer, you know, KMO was using it
Right.
over on Patty Place.
Right, and we have town records stored in there right now.
Right, and that building is, you know, if we're gonna continue to use it for that, it's gonna need some renovation. But the way that they situated that building on the property, it would be easily expandable. With the same style of building, you could just add on, similar to what he shows here with the highway garage. That would, you know, be something to look at. Outside of that, I noticed that place across the street's for sale again. That might be something to look at and consider.
And, you know, I know it's still for sale is, you know, in front of the highway garage too.
Yeah, that.
But I don't, that can't take your equipment. I mean, we, you know,
Right,
right?
just the grade of that property.
Yeah,
is-
that's not, I'm just mentioning it, but I
Yeah,
don't see that
yeah.
as something that you could use, but.
I looked at that when we
Right.
had talked about it before, and I just, the way the grade is on that, it would take extensive site work to make that practical for us to use. And, you know, it'd be a lot of money to get there.
Right.
But yeah, that's the story on the barn. We do have the pole barns that we store the equipment in. They're in pretty decent shape. They serve the purpose that they were intended to, but we've gotten packed full, you know, and I got stuff sitting outside.
So while it's not the priority, the highway garage is for that, but we should start looking at this because the building isn't getting any younger and any better to operate it. And I am concerned, Steve's going to get by this winter, but I don't think we can get by another winter, you know, without the proper heating and repair services. So we need to look at that. But, no, the highway garage is priority, and then I think, at one of our next meetings, not a workshop, but then you should be prepared to update us, with your updated cost estimate and, the bidding, for it.
Sure. Have it on the list.
Okay, good.
So just going down quick, Robinson Lane, we're wrapping up the ADA restroom. That's this little project here. It's gotta get, startup going in the spring and tested and all that, and work that out with Steve. But, another big piece of work that was remaining was to complete the outfield. And remember, there's a concrete curb and the lip
Right.
and all that there, so we had allocated money, and I think, the board appropriated a certain amount of funding, whether it was directed, specifically to that, but I think you had a laundry
So
list.
we have $100,000 that we allocated, we spent about 7, and the remaining 93,000 is supposed to go towards taking down a couple of the dugouts there on R3, repairing the dugout on R4, putting out more additional clay out there, repairing fences, and there's a number of other things that we were looking to do with that money.
Yeah.
So it's all stuff that we need to make sure we start doing in the springtime. I know you're probably working with, is it Nikki Diggs who does that?
I haven't been able to get in contact with him for a while.
But we got to find a contract that's going to go ahead and do that.
Well, we had got pricing through trying to do a change order to get that, but I think it was kind of high, so
By the way, the residents say thank you for putting out the timers on the lights out there.
it's working good.
So it worked really, really nice out there. It looks good.
They weren't working for a while. I figured out what was wrong with
The cold.
them. The trigger had fallen off the
Uh-huh.
dial.
That'll do it.
Yeah.
So Rockingham, just moving along, Rockingham, we demoed that building, took care of the eyesore, and then just generic other potential quote-unquote park projects. We talked a few times about Chelsea Marina. There's quite a bit of work to go on there, negotiations with easements and whatnot, and then also the Reese Park footbridge.
Would the American Rescue Plan Act apply to Chelsea Marine?
No. It's for water, sewer, and COVID relief or replacement of income. There is other infrastructure funding that was approved by Congress, but as of today, there isn't any guidance as to how it will be allocated, but I believe it would cover probably docks and.
Yeah, they've talked about it, at least.
We need to get
covers
that
transit
fixed.
infrastructure, I believe it covers
That,
docks.
that's really important because it's becoming a safety
Right.
issue to the
That's
utmost
not- yeah.
with a lot of the people from the town using that marina. And the wall on the side is really falling down. So that needs to be bumped up before somebody gets hurt. Seriously.
We did the survey, that's actually not our wall.
Right, so we should,
Whatever it is, it's a safety problem. We need to have it addressed.
and I think Angela, at one point in time, you'd asked for a letter to go back to the Chelsea Yacht Club to see
Right.
if they can't firm up that
Some-
wall.
something needs
Something needs to be
to
done. That is
give-
Well,
it's a hazard.
And we had discussed that, plus also perhaps rededicating part of the road to them, so as part of the agreement, right?
They would
At
maintain
least
it.
conceptual, so there's a quid pro quo,
Yep.
exchange there. So I think we need to dust that off, and I agree with Angela
Now-
before the spring
Exactly.
hits, so that's a key
And-
element.
Yep.
Steve, what do you think about putting something across the road, so, like a barrier, so people just don't drive into the river? I mean, there's a sign that says the road ends, but maybe we should put something there? I'm sorry?
How are you gonna use the ramp?
Well, you wouldn't use it in the wintertime.
Oh, you're talking just in the wintertime?
Yeah, just in the wintertime, because somebody can just go into the river. There should be some kind of a barrier, plastic barrier, something there.
Mike about that. We don't have
Yeah, I
anything
mean, you guys can think it out, but something needs to be put there in front of that, so nobody makes a mistake at night or whatever.
We'll talk with Jim too on that.
Please. I'd like to know at the next meeting what we can do about that. But
Does
I would
anybody
really
use it
like
in
to
the
get.
wintertime? Do we have any?
I'm not down there to watch.
No.
I
Nobody's
can't say
using
whether they
it.
do or don't.
It's just, you just
I mean, we
need to
could
put something on the road so nobody goes
Well, we
into
probably
it.
would need to set, a period of time, statute,
Right.
adopt a local law saying from such and such period.
Probably during the
So
same
winter
winter
parking.
hours as no parking on the roadways,
Exactly, yeah.
same thing.
Yeah.
But
So-
not in the event of snow, just generally blanket,
Right.
no use.
How long that would go up.
No, I agree.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I think you would do it, I don't know, first of December through March. I mean, it's easier to do it that way.
I would do it in November. I think that's whatever it is.
Surprised.
Let you guys figure it out.
Yeah.
But I don't want anybody to go into the
Yeah,
river
if I take the-
unintentionally.
The dock out too early, I hear about it.
Right.
I'm not talking to,
If we have
yeah.
a warm November, then they're looking to get in there.
But, you know,
It's very tough to do, because almost all of our work and events and stuff are weather related,
Of course,
and it varies from year to year depending on the weather.
of course. But I would be fair to say at least December 1st. I don't care how warm it is in December. Something should be put up there until, but that's a safety
but,
thing.
you know, back to
also.
what Angela and I discussed, Jim, we need to put
Excuse me.
together a framework of a letter proposal to, the Chelsea Yacht Club
Sure, we
for
can.
how we address both the wall issue and, as a quid pro quo, we get that. Because originally, we had talked about them perhaps expending the monies for the initial repair of the wall, right? And then we would take it over, and then we would also give them use, so that way Mike also doesn't have to maintain that area. It
Right.
gives them some additional parking and allows us to take over our space, including where Steve stores the
docks or
docks,
whatever.
during the winter, right? So that's what we,
that's
therefore,
actually
having a
my-
meeting, I think, we like, probably sometime in March to have a meeting, so
Yeah.
we can be, as the ground thaws and
Yeah, if we have
we need to do that.
somebody who knows the Commodore.
Well, I think
I
Angela
do, yeah.
does.
Yeah.
So I do too, but Angela knows better, and being in her
Yeah.
ward and a key aspect of her ward,
Right.
she
But
can do that.
can somebody investigate
Yeah.
the fact of launching the boats there? How that can be fixed, or what agencies are available
Bless you.
to help with that? You go, bless.
Bless you,
In
Bill.
one respect.
Because when you go to launch a boat, when your car goes down there, that whole area, your whole car
Yeah.
goes right into the
Yeah.
river.
So Tim,
That
you
has
had
to
done
be
an initial
fixed.
study, right, of what it would
Yeah,
take
we've
to.
got survey shots, like, everything like in these budget numbers is quite involved, unfortunately, but, it's like basically having to build a cofferdam out, de-water, and fix all that.
Whatever, somebody's
Yeah.
car is gonna go in there and it's gonna go floating down the river.
And that's
Or
what.
somebody's gonna get
Right.
hurt. That's another.
Part of our original grant for the waterfront, funds was for that purpose, so
You'll have to go
we'll
get them.
keep at it.
I'm sorry?
I said this-
He'll go pick.
Hey, he's gotta
pull
go
them
get
out.
'em.
Yeah.
Yeah, just put that on your list. No, but seriously, I would like to have a checkpoint when I'm gonna have the information on that, maybe at the next meeting, the next town board meeting, just what the status is, because summer's gonna be coming here.
I think the best first step is to connect to the Commodore. And if-
That's not a problem, but that's not gonna address where the people launch the boats.
I think the easiest thing as an interim would be do not launch your boat during like low tide, like
And-
an hour, like I don't know how you do it, but it's really
The-
about
Well,
that.
Jim, whatever code change
It's
you
very
think, or
difficult to.
some resolution to,
Who's gonna enforce that?
Well, my thing
Well-
is from liability, at least the town has a sign that says,
It already says use
All
at
right.
your own risk.
Yeah.
Right.
It already says it.
what Mike does in some other areas during the winter months is put some big concrete blocks or
No, no,
boulders.
I'm just talking about.
No, I
In
understand.
the
No.
springtime when
Well,
everybody
that's,
goes to launch their boat.
I thought we were.
Yeah.
So if you guys could just let me know how that's progressing. like
I'm not sure we
at
can
each-
legally drop a Jersey barrier there. I don't think you can
no,
obstruct that.
probably not.
I don't think you can obstruct it.
from
Well,
going
we
into
could
the
if you
river?
adopt a local law.
I know it's used for emergency access though. So if
Oh,
something happens,
in the winter?
yeah, if something happens out on that river and they can't get in because we have a Jersey barrier, that's a problem.
Does Chelsea use that as a water source too?
I don't know.
Chelsea Fire?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know that there's a dry hydrant there, but
I could find out, but I don't know.
Yeah, you'd have to coordinate, that with the, I don't know, at one point, the sheriff's.
well, right now, if there's an emergency on the river right now, we have a warm day, like last week, they're gonna take a boat and they're gonna drop it in
Right.
someplace.
Right.
In fact,
But
they
I had talked with the sheriff, in the past, and also with Kirk, is that they would be interested, in fact, having some location out there in Chelsea if we had a more permanent location, as we were exploring before with the other parcels. So that's something, you know, as we look at how to enhance the quality of.
I know there's, you know, a bunch of intermunicipal grant funding
Right.
opportunities, so to the extent we get the fire districts or
I could find out about the
county,
fire company, that's not a problem.
involved in getting a grant to fix that problem at the end of the ramp, since, you know, public safety agencies use it, that might be helpful.
Bill, does the
Exactly.
fire department monitor them?
Well, the only boats that are there right now is New Hamburg is at White's, Sheriff's
Yeah.
Office is at White's, but they're out of the water right now.
Yeah, yeah.
But if there's an emergency during the, then they trailer boats to whatever access point they can get in,
Right.
and they put it out there. That's what,
Yeah, but I think I'll see it goes into the river,
Oh,
whereas
White's is-
White's doesn't.
no, White's, they have, everything's docked.
Exactly, so that's my biggest concern, is
That's
that
also
people are
private.
just gonna,
Yeah. But that's one of the only free access points
I know.
in Dutchess County.
besides Beacon, right? Beacon's free.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
familiar with that one, but
Yeah, Beacon's free. But whatever.
it's
Thank
safer
you.
in
Yeah.
some way, shape, or form, but I mean, it's not an easy, you know, building a dam to get the water out and re-engineer the you know, that's, you know, millions of dollars.
Well, the other issue is permitting too. So,
Yeah.
Can't put a price on somebody's life.
At low tide, you can drop it into Wapner's Creek, but then you better hope you get back
Right.
before high tide.
Yeah.
You can't get back. I've done that
Okay.
before with fire department boats. You gotta get back before the tide comes in. You're stuck out there.
Okay. Tim, you want
Thank
to
you.
Yeah,
So
so
you-
continue?
other park projects, we started the Sergeant Palmetier Memorial Park, like, kind of like a phase one, and we got the, you know, the rough grade of the parking, so I just didn't know, you know, keeping that on our horizon, do we want to move forward to a more advanced phase? I know working with the property owner, he had some other site development plans. Radar. We did talk about the Rockingham abatement and remove the building. Here's Spook Hill showing the different layouts and the track, and, you know, again, it's like breaking it up into these phases of dollar amounts. We talked about that, talked about Robinson Lane. Carnwath Center, you know, it's basically going to provide ADA parking and access to enter in the lower floor to have a community center. We're working with Jessica, did weeks ago now, or a week ago about, and that's what led to us doing, we have to get you, I have a copy for you to look at the QR code stuff. I'll give one to Steve too. But again, it's a walkthrough, and that's.
And relate, why don't you mention this first?
Okay, so a camera to go in and do basically a 3D laser imaging data that it takes. You can physically navigate down the hall, look right, left, but I didn't want to crash the system tonight. So this is just basically a still.
It's
of
amazing.
Of the photo 3D model. And,
Yeah.
you know, it just helps spatially. You can dimension off of this. We use it for like inventory when we do schools, building condition surveys. It's training, visualize what rooms could be what. And then we did the same for the manor analog for the required to get that. So, and you know, I think fire in there. However, we're noting signs of the buckling of the foundation stuff. Or is that new? Would you say? Do you know?
I would say that's probably new, that the foundation had been shored up at one time. The water on the side failing.
So again, last year, you know, we need to make a decision one way or the other what we're doing with that building. You know, this will help us. You know, Tim and Steve deep dive. With respect to the Reese Cultural Center, the multi-story building where we're talking about the rec on the first floor or the basement, depending on how you look at it. I've had some, very good discussions. Bill knows about one of them where the Dutchess County are very interested, as I told Bill, in a possible for firefighters, and they're looking into some of both a combination of archives, or clothing, various things, as well as of old, firefighting, vehicles that could be out at the carriage house. Any of you that have gone to the state fair, you will notice that during the state fair, they do have a temporary
County fair.
the county fair, I'm sorry, the county fair. So very exciting, actually, and they are, going to be able also to work with us. One of their ideas too is to take the, carriage house and turn the facade into an old fire station looking, building. But that is very preliminary. The same thing with respect to Veterans and War Museum. Adam is interested in talking with Kevin on holding a similar thing out there that would both significant draw, not just locally, but county and Hudson Valley. So there is some growing interest in using the facilities other than the mansion at this point in time for some real meaningful activity. So we'll be, looking at that and, bringing this. I think the firefighters want to come to the board to present, same with the veterans. So we'll have some discussions, and I think in the next month or so on that as they pull together some of their numbers. So that would be here in this particular building.
We also have the, was it MIG grant that?
Right, for the water,
source.
which would then help because they want to try to get up and running, and so if we're able to use that for, the plumbing and, fixtures, then that will be a real plus.
Additional hydrants.
Right. So that, I think, over the next few months we'll be discussing, but we really do need to take a very close dive, Tim and Steve at the structural integrity of the mansion building. And if there is buckling and, some issues there, then we have to understand that with a recommendation to the board.
Definitely.
So that was my high level.
What do you have on, I wanted to talk a little bit more in detail about, some of the sewer, projects. Do you have some other slides that talk about Wildwood and, show the outline, refresh the memory of the board members?
I could find that. I don't have it at my fingertips.
We talked about the money, but I think for idea, and then we need to create a timetable to get that moving, quickly. So we have, more briefings, more discussions, and particularly community involvement.
Do we know where Woodhill Green sits right now?
No, we haven't, that's where we've been trying to finalize, and with this additional grant money, that specifically identifies Woodhill as one of the beneficiaries of that, the additional $1 million, so.
So how much do we actually have in total for grant money? I thought the original project was 5.5. I thought you had 2.4 you secured, plus
Right.
another million
So
on
we
top
have
of that.
another $1 million on
So
top of that.
3.4 of the roughly 5.5 is covered, assuming expenses stay where they're
Right,
at.
right.
Okay. So another $2 million that at some point in time the residents would have to pick up the tab on, unless we use some
Or,
of the.
yeah, which is my
ARPA money.
preference to try to use at least some of this first phase, I mean, all of it,
Yeah.
not all of it, but we can
Some
take
of
the
it.
whole pot, and divvy it up along that and other projects. So I think it's going to be important, and it's, I think, very relevant in the sense of even making the environment cleaner and safer, because of taking offline the old facility in Wildwood. So, that's what I think you need to have Tim and Wilson and so forth take a close look, and John, on what those additional costs and what might be the recommendation, and then with, I think, Jim and Frederick of how do we defray some more of the costs, and then take it, to the residents with the several options that we have.
Yeah. That makes
If,
sense.
on Wildwood, if Tim was just saying the costs on the supplies are up 30 to 40%, would it safe to say that the cost on the project's gonna go up 300 to 500,000? Tim?
Well, it depends on like the types of supplies, so that reference 30 to 40%, we're finding mainly on building projects like pre-engineered where it's all steel, custom steel. We're finding like on some hospital jobs, like high voltage electric, anything like the big copper wires and things that are like high voltage.
Well, the other thing too, don't you have built in there, don't you have a little bit level of contingency in there for things like that too? So it's not gonna be the full 30 or 40%
Right.
impact.
Right.
So this is the Wildwood.
Yeah, why don't you walk us through it, and walk through the
So
residents
this
of
is
Alachua?
the blow up of the Wildwood, the map here. And the idea would be, the subdivision's up here and it goes to a wastewater treatment plant and then discharges to the Wappinger Creek. So we would pick up the sewage from the inlet, say, of the wastewater treatment plant and then pipe it basically down through an easement of Wood Hill Green and cross Route 9 and tie into, the village system, which is what this little blow-up was. And then the idea to help offset the cost would be to include the Wood Hill condos in, as additional users, which still needs to be negotiated. We were actually waiting to see if we were gonna get the WQIP,
Right,
because every
exactly.
time you try to negotiate something, everybody wants to know how much it does it cost, and you don't know until
Yeah,
how much
now we do.
funding that you have. So now I think we're in a position to a little bit more clearly kind of describe that, so that's kind of it for a while, it's not.
Now, the mobile home park, wasn't there?
Well, there's expressed interest by the mobile home park, owner to be connected to the sewer. In fact, that opens up, that possibility, at least along New Hackensack. Of course, going in a little bit, we also have some interest, for sewer connection. That would be another phase, but I think certainly along New Hackensack, and the deli, the mobile home park, and some other structures, would be, candidates for that, because the line's going down there, so.
Which wasn't there before.
Right, right. So yes, I think that whole area, and then we, should, have a community meeting once we really get our numbers done, which needs to be done real soon.
Do they have their own plant, that part, or do you know?
I would assume they
Yeah.
do, because they're in such close quarters.
Yeah.
But it's
I
not,
mean, it's probably
Right.
a septic
Right.
field somewhere.
Okay.
the Department of Health, DEC would love us to be able to offer that hookup to
Sure,
them.
sure.
And there may be some other, funding or things that we can do. We haven't exhausted everything. We can add something else. But I think as to the core funding for the original project, there's nothing else that we can get from state, would be the feds, to the extent that we can use ARPA, or there may be some other
I
funding.
mean, to connect that, I would just, probably near where the septic field is put a pump station in and pump it up
Be
to
the
the,
ideal thing.
Yeah.
pump it up to the, because that's a gravity main at that point.
Gravity main from where the mobile home is.
I mean, is it a gravity main down to Wood Hill, or is it a force main?
That I don't recall. I think it's gravity.
That was my recollection.
Using this map, Tim, can you also, while we have, talking about water and sewer, show roughly where the water interconnection, that, $3 million project we're talking about?
I can probably try to pull up on that.
Okay, well then-
This one goes that far.
Any other questions, though, on this? before
Not on
we
that
move off?
particular project, I just had
But we
one
have
other
to-
question
Yeah.
for Tim, but different project.
Oh, okay.
Can I do that now?
Yeah,
I wanna
go
do
ahead,
it.
yeah.
Hey, so one of the things we talked about is Sprout Creek. We talked about potentially needing that to be dredged because we have a number of flooding, and I know we have to go through DEC and probably EPA and all that stuff to, see what that would entail, because we have a lot of flooding back on Joan Lane, Paulette, but you also have it on the soccer fields at Rockingham. You got the fields over at Robinson Lane, and probably all the properties that are connected back there. Something I think we wanted to take a look at and see if that's a viable option to do something like that, and what would be the cost of that, because in talking with the highway guys, they could do probably a lot of that dredging, but again, we want to make sure we have all the permits, we're doing everything that we're legally allowed to do, et cetera. So don't know what your thoughts are on that, but, we're getting some questions on that, and,
As
but I don't
I,
want,
mentioned, that's a very extensive project that's going to require something like the Wappinger Creek
Okay.
WIC. But today I was on the phone call, we're going to have our WIC meeting next week, and I've already started, the discussions to, explore for funding in order to do the study. But there has to be an initial, study. They have to understand, similar to what we've done with the Wappinger, Creek initiative. So, but that's started, at this
Okay.
point in time. And
Again, I
I'll
just wanted
give
to
a
bring it up.
report
I-
after next WIC meeting, then I can give a
I
more
figured it'd be a
detailed report.
long-term project,
Right.
but I just want to make sure we get that out there and in front of, it's something that we need to talk about from a capital planning perspective and
Right.
whatever else we need to do, so.
And that's going to be an intermunicipal project. Actually, next week, I think it's next week, we're having a meeting
With East Fishkill?
with East Fishkill and
Oh.
Fishkill to talk about several projects, but including that
Okay,
one.
great,
There
thank
is
you.
interest, it will involve LaGrange as well, because the headwaters go up there, not as long as the 46, 47 miles of the Wappinger Creek, but, one of the things that has to be studied, which they require for the permitting, is, what are the sources of both, whether it's, runoff, dirt, of chemicals, what have you. I think the silting that's in the Sprout Creek is quite significant. I know that there is talk about more federal monies on flooding. In fact, I think there's a program that just came out or is being announced for that too. So, we'll look at all that. And as I said, Al, I really look to you, working with me on that,
Absolutely.
committee.
Yeah.
While we're talking about water, where are we on the pond at Rockingham? I just signed off a contract, so maybe you can just mention that since
Yeah,
it's relevant.
so a couple things going over at Rockingham. Number one, I want to thank the supervisor for signing off on the contract that was just finalized today. They're going to do their first visit out there in early April. I plan to be there as they go through, doing what they need to do in treating the pond. So I think that's a great first step as to help some of the flooding, some of the other things going on there, but also weed control and things like that over at the pond. So again, I want to thank the board for their support on this particular project, for advancing this thing. It's been a long time coming, and I think it's going to be good for the Rockingham folks.
So our intention is to clean it up and then maintain it.
Correct.
Over time.
So we have a 2-year contract set up today, so a good idea by the supervisor to do this over 2 years, so you kind of keep them involved in
Right.
that and see where we go from there, but I think it's a good idea. So first year will be probably a lot of the cleaning up, second year will probably be more of the maintaining, and hopefully what we'll continue to do is, keep the contract, and hopefully the cost will come down at some point in time. It's about $8,500 for 2 years, so it's a pretty good investment to get that done, but it's a long time coming, so thank you for your support on that, I appreciate it.
But, back to your point, though, we have to make sure that with respect to that park, we do look at, the flood control, because you don't want the Sprout Creek every year or every couple of years flooding back in and bringing all the crap back into the pond
creek.
either,
Yeah,
right? So that's a real issue that we are really starting to look at. But when it comes to the creek, and Al and I have discussed it, is that it really involves looking at it from going all the way beyond, well, it's really Robinson Lane and beyond, but the
Right.
whole eastern boundary of the town, from the northernmost point, where the creek forms the boundary of the town, and going down to a little bit beyond, and maybe down to Brown Road across, down that area is what we have to look at as far as ultimately the environment, the dredging, and creating a nicer area for recreation, actually, with flood control in mind, so,
And speaking with creeks, I know you're heavily involved with the Wappingers.
right.
How is that? Because that directly affects Quiet Acres.
Yeah. So Wappinger Creek, we're at the point, like I said, I'll have the meeting next week, and then I'll be able to brief the board, but the study that was done, and the multi-phase study, I think, is about to be finalized. We had a briefing before on that, and then and already some projects up at the headwaters and so forth are in way, but that's going to also involve dredging, but the initial issues really relate to the EPA and the cleaning of the contaminated areas down in the village and also along South Creek, and then moving upstream because of the lake, right? And then everything flowing north. But I think it's a multi-phase project. You know, right now, I think one of the principal focal points is to make sure that any of the chemicals, the inorganic materials that are going in, also the erosion control. One of the actually prime areas that we're looking at is really in the town. Now, of course, shutting down Wildwood. Wildwood is one of the, I think, 5 largest polluters, although we don't think it's polluting, but when it comes to what the DEC is looking for is adding to, the content of the lake. We have another one right in that same area. What is it? It's Greens Pond, I think, they call it, that comes across the street in New Hackensack, down along the south side of the airport. So that's, from a sediment point of view, that is one of the major contaminants of the, I think it's one of the top 5 of the creek, actually. So, the state is looking at it in connection with the roundabout, and I had a meeting today with the state and the county, and actually Owen was on the call, Bill. Actually very good meeting. And so when that roundabout, as that goes in, they're going to also be doing more drainage. And again, Jim, it's one of those things that if drainage is allowed to be looked at, in the context of RFARPA, that may be something that we then can look at as well, because it will address part of the major sediment intrusions into the creek. So that's something that we can discuss more detail.
Just one other point on Rockingham real quick, and I want to thank Steve for doing this. They put out that big cement pipe out there, so what happened was there's a number of ATVs going by where the drainage lines are, and in order to, because they were just flying over that, and you've got those big drain pipes out there, and people were going to get hurt, so what they were able to do temporary fix was to put those big cement pipes out there. They're eventually going to put a permanent guardrail in there, but temporary fix, so tell the residents, if you see this big cement pipe, that's only temporary till the springtime. Again, that'll be repaired between Steve and I guess Mike will take care of that.
Highway's helping us with that.
Yeah, so thank you for taking care of this so quickly. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Tim, did you find your water interconnection slide?
And one was corrupted, I have an overall map just hanging on.
So to remind the residents and also the board, this interconnection project was really initiated at the request of the village in order to help with emergency supplies of water, such as when they have heaven forbid, another drastic fire, but also as their systems have aged and the need to clean out, to take the water out of their storage tanks and so forth. This is a backup, but it helps us in the sense that if we have a major break along the water mains, up in Chris's ward someplace, and so we wouldn't have to, shut off the entire area, we would be able to open it up and, allow the water to come
Is
in.
that manually opened? or
Yeah,
is it
that would be
automatic?
manual, right, Tim, as we were
Yes.
talking about, and so we can control that opening.
Was there a chargeback? Are we looking at a chargeback from getting money from the village for them using it from an emergency source?
Well,
or-
that, I think Tim
think that was
was,
something
Tim,
Jim was looking at.
Jim was
Yeah, no, there's
We-
an intermunicipal agreement.
intermunicipal
Okay.
agreement that we have.
Basically, it's based on the cost of production of the water. So-
We had to submit that
Yeah,
agreement
again,
as
we want
part
to make
of
sure our
the,
neighbors are being taken care of and
grant,
whatever, but I know there was an
program,
agreement
but
they were
yeah.
working on.
but it's
The
languished.
connection is metered.
Sorry?
There's a meter on the connection.
No, it's languished because of the uncertainties, the change of the mayor and some of the other financial issues that they've had. But I think, the mayor has committed, now that we've closed it, it's moving forward. So, that's where, we're going to have to look at, Tim's plan as far as the shovel in the ground and then, getting the bidding.
Was there a sense of urgency for this one to get it completed?
Well, I think,
Broke up.
I'm sensing there's a greater sense of urgency, for that.
Okay. Thank you.
My search keeps coming up with the Wood and Green Connect.
And I think, that's something that is moving ahead, and we're going to, Tim will be looking at what the final cost estimates as we put out the bid come back to the board, with respect to that. But we are basically now committed, to the state with respect to that. We're the lead, agency on that, or I guess, Jim, in some ways, the sole agency, the way the closing went. But nevertheless, it's a good project and will help with, quality of water and also backup. As you know, one of the main things that we've been doing throughout the town is looking at, backup to our various water supplies. Of course, we added, 2 new, well fields, and improved that. I've gotten, word from, and Jim's been on it, the DEP wants to really finalize the arrangements with us. They want to close out, the current project. Right now, they are willing to talk with us, negotiate with us about, water sourcing off the aqueduct, and also they have, 2 parcels of land that they own, houses right along the road there, Angela, that they're willing to sell back to us. If we were to connect with their water, we're going to have a station there, to address both the pressure and the purification, so, as a requirement. But the good news is that they are getting closer to the conclusion of the project. They still have within, I guess their estimates are maybe 1 year to finalize everything, but they want to close out the project and work with us on the final agreements, which we'll be discussing with them, I think, in the next month, and then talking with the board as to what all that means. And by the way, I did raise Angela with them again about the barriers, the plastic, the sheathing that goes on the fence.
They've been
That-
replaced. They've already
Yeah,
seen-
so they,
yeah.
that's what I was going to say, just
Thank
for
you.
people know, they talked with them a month ago. They were,
And they fixed the signs
yeah,
that are on Chelsea
Good.
Road, which is a good thing.
okay, good.
Instead of them falling apart.
So if there's anything else that you see,
Well,
let me
it's
know.
interesting, the rest has private wells in it, so if people have contaminated water, that could be part of this.
Yes.
Okay. That's something I want to look into, because I have people in my ward that have water that they cannot drink.
I think you'd have to, make it available, townwide. I don't know.
So could you find out and let me know what we can do about that? Because again, I have people, if it says private wells, I have people that have problems
Yeah, throughout the town.
with
right.
water in their, why don't we take advantage of that?
Now, Bill, the taking through their fundings of the modernization of, wideband and so forth, broadband, I mean, right?
Yes.
So we don't have to worry about anything from the town point
No,
of view. do
no, we don't.
Yeah.
With respect to the private wells, though, I don't think
I'm
we can.
talking about wells.
Yeah.
No, I know,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just,
I don't think we can use that money to mitigate people's wells. I think we can provide an alternate water source.
Anything to help them.
Email this to you.
And by the way, for the record, I have a cold and a negative COVID test.
yeah, he assured me beforehand.
I'm glad you
Just
told
want to
me.
let everybody know, we're all sitting on top of each other here.
No, but I do want to.
2 negative tests.
That explains why you've been so quiet.
Well,
I
you're lucky
wanna-
I'm sitting here, I'll tell you that.
Jim? And Tom, I want to investigate the private well thing for the people, what we have to do to help them.
But
If
you'd
we have to
make
find
it-
an alternate water source, that's something I want to look into for these people.
I think what it could be is if you want to extend municipal water for the purposes of offering a water source for those that have contaminated wells, that might be,
That's acceptable.
right, an acceptable use, so
But I have quite a few people that have that problem.
some research might be.
So Jim, can you look into that and let me know, please?
Sure. I mean, what would happen is the town would have to allocate a certain amount of money for that particular appropriation. And then they would have to come up with a criteria for the people who would qualify for that.
And if we have
You have to
DEP
do-
willing to work with us, I'm sure we might be able to figure something out.
Well, I mean, you'd have to, I think you'd need to get an idea of how many people would qualify for it.
That's fine.
What would be, the average cost and, how much it would be per person. So,
That's fine. I have people that need help with their water.
So I'll zoom into everybody
Okay.
because the street wasn't labeled in, but, so all the blues is United Water District. And as part of the village interconnect, we have Losi Road right here. And the intent would be to, see my hand moving right here, is to just basically run a connection pipe between here and the village water system. So on a grand scheme of things, it's a small feat that way, but basically the way the project's set up is the village brings the water main to the town connection side. They need a pressure reducing valve, and we would need a pump station because they don't have the pressure. So the way it was teed up, they already have health department approval and submitted that. We had the meetings here relative to funding, and then now, based on our discussions with the village and also EFC, that they have a USDA grant of like
Right.
17 million, like a very broad nebulous, all-encompassing, I should say, not necessarily nebulous, but...
Yeah, multiple faceted
multiple,
use
right.
for them.
So they were going to fund their share of
Right.
the project through that, so it was looking pretty bleak there for a while, but then it got tracking, so all that for that, but it's really just this one little stretch right
it's basically running from Riverbend along Losi Road to, I guess, Aladdin Court is the connection.
Right.
I'm familiar with that.
Well, we're looking in the map, again, the nemesis that we've had throughout, is I noticed that area that's not served by water, it's surrounded by all the other, the water district, right? So is that something, again, has there been any need, I think from the councilmen, for interest in water connection? At that point, if you look at down at the bottom, right? Bottom left-hand corner, we have those number of parcels that aren't in the water district.
Do we have a map showing where our water mains are? I'm sure somebody has that.
We do, but it's in GIS and it's not absolutely accurate, I'll say.
Okay.
And it's a constant work in progress. We have the hydrant map, that's another work in progress.
That's still a work in progress, but hopefully, in the water mains and so forth. But I think, we've talked about that before as far as how to, connect, this patchwork quilt that we have inherited.
Some of these areas, there's got to be historic reasons why they're not included in the water district. There's got to be issues that occurred, decades ago where they opted out or something.
Well, some of them were just kind of a function of development, like, one box there is 4 Fields Court, which is a private road, and that predates, so that's... to the
Along
right.
Myers Corner up,
Yeah.
in the middle of the map.
And then, the piece in the back, I'm not sure, that,
Oops.
the one piece there, I'm not sure what that is. That might be a town.
Al likes Warfield.
That's, around
That's what I
Cranberry.
thought. Yeah, it's by Cranberry.
That's one of the Cranberry, that might be the town-owned, no, actually, I think that's a private residence. There's a private residence there off of Quaker Lane. They're all back, built in the 50s.
It's right adjacent to Ketchum High School, then Ketchum High School on the left,
Yeah.
Ketchum is on the left, Cranberry is to the back, is the larger piece,
which is all watered.
and then.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
There's fire hydrants in the woods.
And then,
It's true.
yeah. And then the 2 pieces there are the Pizza Galley buildings. And then to the right is
Evergreen?
the white, in the right, one of those is Central Hudson substation.
So my opinion on this American Rescue money is similar to my colleagues. If we can extend water to areas that are in need, whether it be the Route 9 corridor to the former plant depot, whether it be the former plant depot to Lawrence Farms, whether it be Lawrence Farms to the town line. I think that pipes in the ground are a good investment with this funding to improve access to water in the future. I also think the interconnect that we're discussing on Myers Corners Road and Losey Road is important also, not only for the village, but for the town. It creates a redundancy for the purposes of, if we have a catastrophic failure of our water system, or if they have a catastrophic failure of their system, it's going to create a redundancy for the purposes not only drinking water, but for emergency use.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if we do come down Route 9, we can also come over Osborne Hill Road. and
Well,
come
that's,
down Route 2.
that's part of what
To
we're
help
also
those
talking
people.
about Plant Depot, about too,
Right.
helping with that, construction back there, so we get it over to Fleetwood.
Yeah, I mean,
very
that
important.
whole area right there
Right. Yep.
needs help.
I learned today, Al, be interested, and the rest of the board interested, that with the respect, I was had an excellent conversation, an hour and a half with the state and county, as I mentioned, DPW, Owen Rafter, and state officials are very cooperative, actually, want to do a couple of exciting projects with us. But that they are planning, it appears, sometime in the next 2 years, once the roundabout is completed there, then to pave 376 from approximately roundabout to East Fishkill. But they raised themselves in connection with the sewer, issues relating to decommissioning Midpoint Park. Well, if they're going to tear up the road, then they'd be more than willing to allow us to put pipe in the ground, to consider, for additional sewer. It's just something for us to
That would
talk
make-
about.
that would
But
make
it's-
sense, yeah.
It's.
It's planning
But
ahead.
I was pleased to see the state, actually thinking that way and wanting to work with us, and, they have.
You were surprised.
Yeah, I was surprised, pleasantly surprised, actually, and complimented them for that. But I just wanted to mention, because it's fresh on my mind, that's what.
And
they're
it makes
looking at.
sense. I mean, before they repave the road and everything else, they're going to allow us to
So
put the pipes down
we
there.
can look at that, and,
We just got to figure out what we're going to.
right, well, that's it. I mean, we
Triangle
can't
or
fund
East Fishkill.
everything, we have to use this, and then,
Yeah.
wisely for where we have some immediate needs, and then some of the framework, or at least some of the study too. I think Tim's CPL has done a lot of work. In fact, looking at, Bill, I think sewer and water down Route 9 is one possibility. So, there's a number of things like that we discussed, which we're not talking about tonight. Yeah.
Yeah, additional storage on the west side of town. We had
Right.
that conversation. We have a high elevation on Carnwath. We
Yeah.
have town-owned property. It might be worth taking a look at, storage tank somewhere up on that property.
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly, yeah. So those are some of the other issues that we didn't highlight, they're included in a sense within this discussion. One of the points that I did have here under public water and sewer, I think we've covered everything else pretty well on that, but is town hall water. And Steve, had mentioned to the board several times, I think, about the stalactites and stalagmites, or whatever it is that's forming in our water system. We, as you all know, we have water that's needed to run the operations here, but it's not drinkable, right? We bring in all the water and bottled water. But Steve is facing some, significant costs. We're facing some significant costs with respect to, well, we already approved new boilers. We have to, make sure that we don't have this problem in another 5 years or whatever the time frame. So one of the possibilities that I've discussed with Tim and looking at is that the residents over at the Nature Preserve also have issues with their wells. And now that we're getting to the point where I think fairly soon we'll be able to interconnect to the big pipeline, then they want to bring water from the pipeline. And we were thinking that they have a tower or a tank in the back of the property. It's a stone's throw, basically from that property to town hall. And that then, if we were to, again, it's something to consider, bring water to town hall, it could be great expense savings for both the emergency services building and here, but also then allows us to consider up and down Middle Bush, and particularly like over to the Randolph School, and we have a number of residents going, east, that are also been historically issues with the quality of the water in their wells too. So again, it's something to
So you're talking
to
about
look
the
at.
water off of Wheeler Hill Road and kind of doing
Yeah,
that?
where Old Hopewell, the main pipeline that goes down before you get to the intersection, where Nature Preserve is, that's that, what is it, Berry Lane or something like they have, right? 50 units or so that go back in.
Okay.
Off of that before you get down, further at the intersection with 9D. And so they have their own private well system. Tim and I, John Bodendorf, we've met, and they have problems with the water system, well quality.
Well, we've had a couple, I guess, in Bill's area that they've
Right.
actually hooked up privately.
Right,
A couple of them,
so
yeah.
actually, a couple of those neighbor this property.
Okay.
When you look at, one is immediately a neighbor, and then George Silvestri was just a little bit further down. He connected, to
Right.
it because of failing wells. So they're going to do that, but again, we can be working with them. But my thought is if you see the map, where we
Is that
could.
town hall straight up?
Yeah, town hall's right here.
Right.
Okay.
The parcel or the driveway going around the building.
I think we all can agree.
So
that
you
the
can see
waterfront-
Berry Lane, see that little complex down there? That's where, and it's in that property that they own, the land. And so then, we're looking at, further down our property, we have the cell tower, we have the emergency services building. So that area, it's not a long distance. Of course, we have to go through some wetlands and do some things there, but it's one possibility to look at.
We also own the property straight to Old Hopewell Road
Right.
behind this building. So,
Exactly.
We also can't forget about Camille and Pleasant because.
Correct. Well, that's why I said if we bring it out, then it could allow us, and, I've talked with the headmaster over Randolph School. They have some issues with their water well as
Yeah.
well.
See, all this water should have been done 50 years ago,
Yep,
and it never was done. There was 90% reimbursement on water and sewer.
Right.
And, I've asked former council members why it wasn't done, and they said that wasn't their priority at the time. But it really needs to be a priority. People need to have access to
Oh,
water, clean
totally.
water. And we have an
Totally.
opportunity to do it. Let's really put together a plan here on how we can make it happen.
Yeah, and I think, consistent with what Frederick showed us as far as when our debt's drawing down, we've maintained a fairly steady level, not really fluctuating significantly. As some debt comes down, we're putting more in until 2029. But, and again, we are still not borrowing real significantly with respect to that. And now's the time. We need to have the list, my point, and why we're doing this, of the projects, because there will be more federal funding. And we want to be able to jump in and get those grant applications in, is really the key.
Quickly.
We're just going to be careful we don't overburden the residents. though.
Correct.
So that's-
Oh, I agree.
That's one of the things.
No,
we're
that's
gonna
why
take a look
we're
at.
looking at all the funding, sources that we are, and have gone out for, maybe, close to $10 million in grants, so far during the last few years, so.
So there's a main that goes down Old Hopewell,
Correct.
and we own the property from here straight across.
Straight back, yeah.
At least it's not, there's no acquisition fee.
No, we own that property, but I think the other benefit that could exist is if we connect Berry Lane and Doe Trail, it says on name there, it's Doe Trail.
Correct.
That particular project went in, the timing was just off. When they put that water line in, the New York City water line, that project was being built just before that happened, so they had to drill their own wells, they had to put their own tank in. So they have basically an independent water system, which, is a well system. And if they're interested in connecting to municipal water to better secure that system, and that brings it even closer to Town Hall, though.
Correct.
If you look at
Yep.
the rear of those buildings on Doe Trail, it says unnamed right there.
Yes.
That
Yep.
brings it right across. There is some wetland there, but,
yep.
Crossing this guy.
yeah, there's gotta be a way to do that.
Yeah.
But again, the residents on Camille Drive and Pleasant Lane,
Correct.
when I first ran for office, God, how many years now, 16, 17 years ago, they were promised, you always get
Yeah.
promised
And-
water.
And they've come in now, when they hear about, saying they were promised, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so we need to address that in this whole area, obviously.
So if we're bringing water from Old Hopewell, if we're bringing it towards Middle Bush, there's a cul-de-sac in the end of Pleasant Lane there too that,
Right.
that's adjacent to the town property. Those houses butt up on the town property. So, just a thought.
So I think, I've asked Tim to take a look at this area, and especially as we're able, and residents are able to interconnect with that, main 12-inch line that's going down that whole road.
Now, the other option that was discussed years ago was, Wappingers Junior High School has village water. I mean, I don't know what the condition of the infrastructure is, but there's village water right across the street, so that's another.
Well, the
That's
highway
another
garage
way
is
you
village
could-
water,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, the-
Highway
You could
garage
tap
is
into,
village
the
water.
town could just tap into that one right there,
That's just another option. I think if you look at cost,
Right. Right across the street.
bringing that water down, I mean, it's right there on the corner of the building.
Yeah.
Again, you're talking subpar infrastructure. Those hydrants are,
Old.
I can only imagine what the pipes are around.
But like you emphasized, water is very important to this town,
Yeah.
and we have to address the issues that the residents have, especially the long-time residents that have seen water go to areas that are just being developed, and they've been in the town for many, many years.
And that's the balance we need to maintain when we're looking at,
Right.
doing infrastructure, expansion for the Route 9 corridor, right? We also need to look
Yes.
at what the residential
Yep.
benefits are, right?
Yes,
So you have existing
exactly.
residents, and we talked about this with Fowler House and South Fowler House, and unfortunately, there's only like 20 or 30 homes in that area. So when you look at extending water and creating a district or creating a shared cost, it can be sometimes unaffordable, right? So if we're doing a wider area to include more
Yeah.
potential residential benefits, that's where you can make it affordable. And
Exactly.
as I've said before, you put a lot of that cost, if you can do it, on the commercial endeavor, right?
Exactly.
So you have a commercial project theoretically coming into 9 in Smithtown, right? It's a lot cheaper for them to extend the water from McFarland south than it is for us to do that. And that's the kind of conversations we need to be having.
Well, it's just like what we've successfully discussed with Stonegate, and Mr. Shaw and Kevin Ludd, right? In that corner there that you barely see, you're right off the little blue triangle on the map, right at, Route 9 and Old Hopewell. That's going to have, water, and they're working on getting that in place. So that's a private effort, but they will pay for and then ultimately, dedicate it over to the town.
And what that does also, right behind Stonegate, if you drive, well, not that you should, but I've been back there with the fire department, right at the end of Stonegate is Beechwood Circle.
Yeah.
So if you're bringing water into Stonegate, you're coming on to the back end of Beechwood Circle, Brook Hollow Court, that area, which is off McFarland. So you got to look at the adjacent areas and how they can benefit also.
How they can be serviced, exactly.
Right. And addressing those white gaps, and here are huge white gaps, from, the blue, which is the Wappinger Central Water District, so.
And also, something that most town boards don't even talk about or think about is something I think about every day, hydrants that are going to be part of this expansion. We don't have a lot of fire hydrants all throughout our town, especially on the west side of our town, and it can be a real challenge if you have a situation that you're trying to deal with. Everything that we've done has improved the public safety factor too. When we extended that water line at McFarland Road, we have
Yeah.
hydrants there, Route 9 from Adams to McFarland. We're going to have a meeting on Thursday to discuss fire hydrants with the fire chiefs and the fire inspector, and I think the engineer, just to talk about some gaps that we've identified. That's very important for public safety as we do this, not only just drinking water for public health, but for public safety purposes.
That's right.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree, totally.
Tim, anything else you want to add as far as the
That pretty much
water sewer?
covered my list. I mean, I think we talked about a lot of stuff tonight, and the idea is to keep fleshing it out, right, and try to refocus back to our projections over the next couple of years, so.
Yeah, we've discussed, and I think where we're heading, and also thanks to Frederick with the work that he's doing, and we still do, is really a 3 to 5 year capital plan. As we're looking at these projects, I think we're making some good progress, very good progress on that. Now we have to, narrow the list, a little bit as to what we're going to use for both take advantage of some of the federal monies and then also some additional grant funding, that, and then, fill in the gaps with some, debt and financing, right?
Yep.
But at least we're planning, at least we're looking forward, we're looking to the future, and to also try to keep our residents safe and give them
And-
what they deserve.
And minimize the cost to them
Exactly.
at the end of the
Exactly.
day. So we've been fortunate in the way that we've been able to do that. I think, we do see some pressure points, as Al has been always reminding us in an extremely competent way, about Parklands Trust. We've used the money wisely, but as you see, we're down to only a few $100,000 effectively. So that's not being replenished anytime, real soon. A few houses here and there, but not much at this point. So we have to be careful, and I appreciate you constantly reminding us, Al,
Sure.
making sure the numbers are right. So, okay, well, let's move on, to talking some more. We've already discussed some, but the parks and facilities, I think, we have a list here, but I think in going in, we've covered, I think Robinson and Rockingham to some degree, but Al, I know you have some points you'd like to make again and emphasize, so.
Yeah, so a lot of it has to do with, and I'll steal Tim's thunder a little bit, but a lot of this has to do with, again, we've committed money, we've committed $93,000, so we should go out there on Robinson Lane and fix those things that we said we were going to do. Field R4, again, fixing the building blocks there and then putting the roof on that one, taking down R3, the dugouts, figuring out what the ultimate solution is, because they're going to put a new slab down there. We also want to take a look at repairing some of the fences, but some of the things we ought to take a look at, from a Robinson Lane perspective is, also replenishing the clay out there for Holdfield, fixing some of the additional lights out there. There's other repairs that we need to do out there at the field. And Steve, one of the things that just came to my attention the other day, I was talking with Jeff when they were doing Little League signups here the other day, I guess there's some big potholes out there over by the store. So I don't know if you had a chance to take a look. You probably didn't even know about it, but if you could take a look at that too, I think that's something. And the other thing we want to look at too is, again, this is more of a concern about the Challenger field is Wi-Fi out there. Again, we've tried to get Wi-Fi out there for a long, long time. Cell phone activity out there is terrible. There's basically no reception out there. So God forbid there's ever an emergency, we don't, it'd be very difficult to get a hold of an emergency vehicle to get out there. So it's just some of those things that I think we need to take a look at from a Robinson perspective. Again, we talked about the flooding a little bit, so we won't go into that. But just things that I think that we really need to take care of out in the field out there. And I don't know where you stand on some of that stuff, but
Well, the asphalt I had, when Clove Excavators was doing the Robinson Lane resurfacing, I had them come in and look at a portion of the area you spoke of. I wasn't aware that there's potholes there now, but there was some cracking and
yeah, they said they're pretty deep.
there were problems that I was looking to ward off, but couldn't get it organized in time while they were there to do it. I can, reapproach that again when
yeah, if you can take a look at that in the, I guess, early spring and stuff. Again, a lot of these things we want to get done before their
Yeah,
baseball
I think
season starts, so.
The extent of damage there is to the point that we need someone with a paver, rather than doing the patch type work. And they do it well, that highway does, but I think it's beyond that point.
So I think then we need to be considering that at the time we're looking at,
Paving.
Mike's, list of paving, and, considering that, we've discussed also, the town hall parking lot and, the ESB. So, if you have some properties that you feel need to have a paver involved, then let's discuss it at the board, whether or not that comes out of Mike's, pool of money or ours, but, at least when he's retaining some, the company to do paving, then we have a captive contractor.
Right, and the more work you put there in their direction, the better the rate is
Right.
on it, so.
Yeah, because my fear is that the tonnage for the asphalt's going to go up dramatically. I think he was getting
sure.
around $70.
Sure, it's a
I'm hearing now it's like
petroleum
$100 plus, so, we fully expect that the $1.4 million we have left to spend out of the bond money is probably going to be equal to or less than the amount of roads we paved this year. So it's something to take into consideration as well. But yeah, Steve, if you have some ideas out there for that, as again, Robinson Lane is certainly something we'd like to take a look at as well.
Why don't we look at B Fund and just fund that out of B Fund?
Sure, we
surplus.
could.
I mean, how much do you think it would cost to pave that road, that entire road from beginning to end? I mean, I don't know.
It's gotta be about a mile, no?
We can get an estimate and then discuss how to finance it.
Yeah, I hadn't asked for pricing in that, to that extent. I think what I was looking at was about $35,000 worth of work.
So if we
but
did-
last summer, and I don't know what that price would be today.
So if we did roughly 6 miles of road, cost us roughly $1.2 million, right? So we're looking at 200,000 per mile, so half a mile is about 100,000, rough estimate, probably high. And I agree with you, probably less than 100,000, probably in the
If you can do it for
50,000.
less than 100,000, I would just pay for it cash out of B fund.
Yeah.
That's what I would do, because we have money there. This is a
Yeah.
capital project, it's gonna last more than 5 years. Rather than put a Band-Aid on it, let's do it right. Right now, the road goes all the way back to the creek and just
Yeah.
kind of turns into a dirt road there. We can explore if it's worth putting a turnaround there or item down so that it's not mud back there.
Right.
Let's do it right, because we have the money to do it, and this is something that is gonna last for a number of years.
I'll work with Tim on that, as I
Yeah.
think that's something that should need to be engineered.
Because that's my pet peeve too, when I drive out there.
And,
It's, you know.
give Clove a call.
Are there speed bumps on that road?
Yes.
Well,
Well,
That, there's a bump there, but I don't know if you call it a speed bump.
Well,
It's
my-
up-
my
so
point
they
is-
keep-
that could be incorporated.
Yeah, my
in-
point is,
Yeah,
if
that's
you.
just something we
it's
should
a-
look at.
Right.
It doesn't meet highway standards, right? It's not a town road. Well, we named it after Ralph,
You could make it,
but I don't know if we want to, because then we'd have restrictions on speed bumps,
Right.
right?
when you also have, well, there's actually the most recent version of the fire code, New York State Fire Code, I believe the fire inspector has to approve any speed bumps.
Well, I think we do need speed bumps on that.
Oh, yeah.
I think that it needs to be done appropriately. It's always kind of been a piecemeal job out there, just because
Yeah.
whatever.
and safety issues and a whole range
Definitely.
of things that I think this is the
Then
year
while they're
to
paved,
do
they'd be
that.
done right.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
The other question is, what's the condition of the subbase?
Well, I'm afraid to ask.
Actually, that whole park is bank run. So, that should work in our favor.
I would say get a quote to get this thing done and
Yeah.
get it done before opening day if we can.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can, but it's gonna,
I'm
it's,
not sure the plants will be open that early.
No, they probably won't be opening early, because
you-
opening
you
day
know
is
where
probably
the,
early April, so.
you know where the cost is going.
Yeah.
Can I stick my nose in a little bit on this one?
Yep.
Sure.
So out there's also a couple of areas, which you guys have been out there. There's one area where the road veers off to the side.
To the left?
Yeah.
Yeah, to the
Between the
left.
fields.
And a lot of people use that as a parking area.
Correct.
back
And it's
there.
all grass,
And
right?
it's all grass, and I've seen cars get stuck
Yeah.
out there, things like that. So if we're looking at doing paving out there at Robinson, we might want to look at some of the areas where people are pulling off and parking on the grass
Yeah.
and making them areas to actually park.
Or at least put gravel down, because we
So,
gotta,
yeah. So you're talking about by SL2,
I mean,
or you talking
what we did
one
at
out
Sergeant
by-
Palmetier is
Yeah, yeah.
really a good
That's-
approach for
What do
that.
they call that
When
stuff?
a lot of
Item
times
4.
people
Item
go
4.
down
Item
Old,
4.
they make
Yep.
Yeah.
that left,
Yeah.
and then there's that big grassy area right behind our,
That's where Steve's dirt's piled up,
No.
pretty much a clay.
no,
I did put gravel out there.
No, but I mean, that's typically where the clay is put, I think, for whole field to
Yeah.
replace that, right? Because don't you have the mound out there?
The
Yeah, I-
pond is right next to Hopefield. I think she's talking to over
Yeah.
the wood line there.
yeah.
Okay.
Behind the electric, the one building there has the electric in it for the fields, field lights. She's talking about back in that area. A couple years ago, I did put a pretty good amount of the millings that we had back in there to try and stiffen it up somewhat. But, asphalt's always gonna work better than that.
I mean, in a perfect world, you would pave the road and have a gravel shoulder on each side, so that when people pull off
Correct.
to park,
Yeah,
and also
a-
that's gonna help with drainage, because as we know too well, that's in a flood zone, right? So
Right.
we gotta be concerned with how many, square feet of impermeable asphalt we put
Exactly,
out there, right?
exactly.
So if we can do this in a way where you're not increasing the
Blacktop.
footprint of blacktop,
Yeah.
and then augmenting it with item 4, for the purposes of making sure people don't get stuck, that might be
That
the
would be
best way to
better.
do this. And again, if we can get quotes for this, I don't see any reason why we can't use B fund to do this.
I agree, Bill. So Steve, if you would, whatever you need to
Right,
do.
I'll
or
work with Tim and
Tim,
we'll
and we
a
get that
contractor
and
out
get
there
some
work
quotes
with
to us, in March, so we can be looking at that, and then
That would be
the
good.
schedule.
Get it done.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll coincide with opening day, but some of the other things we can get done out there on the field, definitely
Right.
gotta get the dugouts done by opening day.
Well, we had a contract to do it, and, we didn't move forward with it.
Well, we got to, now we have the
Yeah.
money set aside, now we
Yeah,
have
so
to.
I think we bring that back to the
Yeah,
front
all right,
burner,
well.
Steve, and again, just
The
consistent.
contractor's no longer around, so
No,
we're gonna have to
we
start from
find
scratch.
somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need to, we're in a unique position right now where we have funding from non-traditional sources, and we also have surplus B fund. I think we're in a position where we've been locked down for 2 years. We want to
Yep.
put money into our parks to encourage people to get together. That's my position.
Get it.
I agree, I think we certainly have the funds there, we should do it. I mean, this is something they've been asking for a while now, and this is gonna be, good for
Yep.
Robinson Lane facility, so again, I agree with that.
Do you want to, anything more on Rockingham, or did we cover that pretty well?
So the Rockingham, I think the only other thing we got to take a look at from a Rockingham perspective is, and actually both fields. So Little League purchased a storage unit. Unfortunately, I guess Jim says that doesn't qualify for reimbursement, but we do have money set aside, $5,000 each for both Robinson and Rockingham. So we got to figure out what's the best way, the appropriate way, the allowable way to go ahead and spend that money. But the second thing is the drainage. So as we know, there's drainage issues here. We kind of addressed it a little bit from looking at Sprout Creek, but that's a long-term project down the road. That's not something that's going to be immediate. So we got to try to find an alternative. How can we make it better? Do appreciate all the work he did out there and making sure they took down, and Tim too, taking down that old KMO building out there, so that was good news, got it filled, so that was good news. But again, we got to try to find an alternative. Their season will start, and if we get another 12-inch year where it's, you get so much rain there, hopefully not, but if you do, I mean, it's going to be an issue, and it's going to continue to be an issue. The problem is that we know that's wetlands, and there's not a whole lot you can do with wetland property. So if there's something we can do, Steve, and I know we were out at the field looking at that, I think Sheen was there with us as well, but there's like that little, I'll call it valley gully where the water runs. I don't know if you can make it deeper, but I'm just looking for alternatives to try to help the drain, because the field is relatively flat. So what I want to do is see, is there a way to drain it?
Right, and as I pointed out, then when we were out there, the storm drains from Regency Drive empty into the park.
Are they all clean, do we know? I'm assuming.
Yes.
Are they all clean?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, at least they've told us they have, and I think Walter has checked them out.
Okay.
No, the Walter has checked it out.
I'm just
So,
making sure that there's
I
nothing.
mean, that, in my opinion, that ought to be rerouted to, to drain into the creek rather than the park. And that's not gonna be something we can do overnight.
Well,
Yeah.
plus it's permitting and all sorts of things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's,
Again, I want to look for an alternative, because that's one of the things that, a number of the soccer, players and coaches and stuff have mentioned to us, to Dick and I, many times. So I don't know what the alternative is, but we got to try to find something if we can. So anything you can think
In order
of.
for, drainage comes up as an issue, in a number of the places we have. And you already mentioned that this is a flat place. In order for drainage to work, the water has to have a lower point to run to. And we don't have much of a lower point to push the water to.
And the problem is the pond is level and it's right down. I mean, you
Right.
can't really drain into the pond, I think, which we don't want to do, by the way, since we now have the service there.
And
But
like I said, it's not helping at all to have that stormwater coming in off the street into the park either. That's one thing that we could do to improve it, is to reroute that directly to this. Well, I'm not even sure that's permitted to do that, but,
Right.
somehow to make the stream the destination rather than the park.
Okay.
What's the condition of the roadway into that park now? Is it paved, or is it?
It's paved,
To a
but the
point.
parking areas are not. There's a portion of the roadway that I elevated to get up over a manhole that was about a foot or so higher than the pavement, that is not paved. The back area where they park is not paved, and it's all rutted up.
Yeah.
you know.
Oh, my God.
My point is, if we're gonna be getting a proposal for Robinson Lane, maybe if we have other parks that could benefit from the same type of.
You can list all of them on that. 'Cause,
Wow.
you know, none
Yeah,
of
so-
our pavement is in very
So
good
the
condition.
paving's pretty good once you go up to, there's, I guess there's the water company, what's up there, is it the water?
KMO has I don't know, if it's a water or sewer plant up
Yeah,
there.
so they have something up there, that's pretty
There's a
well
pump
paved, but
station.
when you go off to the left towards where the actual soccer fields are, once you get past that gate there, it's all basically, all really needs to be done.
Yeah, and
Steve
then
did a
that
great job
parking
with
area on the
the,
right is gravel. You know,
we actually did millings there, so that was good, off to the right, that
Yeah.
parking lot, so we used a lot of the millings, made a,
a good
semi-good
base.
parking lot there, base, but it would be nice if, once you get past that gate to the left, again, Steve did a really nice job putting down the stone and everything, but every year he's got to probably add to that stone and everything else, but if that can be paved, and oh, by the way, out by where the pond is, a lot of folks park right in front of the pond or on the back where the benches are, and you're right, it tears up the field, so if there's something else we could do to widen it, because it actually comes to like a cul-de-sac in the back there by where the pond is, right where the old
Right.
building used to be, the
right,
pump
that should
station.
Get graded, dug out with a dozer and then put backfilled with either
But
millings
that,
or
you're right,
gravel.
Bill, that's something that, we could, maybe you do it, maybe you don't, but that's a proposal we put together, and if we do have some B-fund money, we can do that. Certainly, I'm sure they would appreciate that as,
Yeah, I would support
Great
that.
gesture.
I mean, anything that's tangible in these parks that we can improve, that's gonna last 5 years, right? Not a one-year improvement.
Right.
I'm talking,
No. Well, our
permanent
long-term capital
improvements.
planning is what we have.
with respect to the pond over there, is there going to be a fence around it when this is done, or what's the
Well,
status
I
of
brought that proposal in last year, and,
about 30,000, right?
yeah, to do a fence around the whole pond is about 30,000.
I think we need to have something around the pond.
I agree.
The soccer president has requested that because they lose balls from those fields into the pond.
Well, I'm not concerned about the soccer balls, I'm
I'm
concerned
concerned
about the
about the
toddlers. Yeah. That are running around there. But I think we should look at that also.
I agree.
I mean, I don't want to put the cart
I
before
wouldn't
the
enclose
horse.
the whole thing, I think I'd keep the back end open, but certainly around three of the sides, and I think that's what your proposal was, to do three, it wasn't to do all.
Well,
Right,
I
right,
had
right.
two proposals. One was 3 sides, and
Yep.
then one was full enclosure.
Yeah.
And, the 30 was the full enclosure. I
Okay.
think 3 sides was around 20.
Yeah, so it's something, we could look at, we should clean that up, then we can clean it up, because we have, like, the chicken wire, or whatever the fence is out there, that's
No,
been there
that's
probably
not-
for
That
50
falls-
years,
that-
and
that-
it's,
That's not good.
it's not gonna do anything, and, again, a safety issue that, forget the soccer balls for a moment, but like you said, but, a child gets over there, it's kind of muddy and mucky, and if you get in there, and we don't want anybody to get hurt on that either, so.
And quite honestly, once we clean it up, it's going to be very attractive.
Very, especially to kids.
We're gonna have Steve go out there and plant flowers around it. And
Well, there
maintain
could be
them,
some shrubs and some landscaping that you do,
I'm kidding,
Maybe our
Steve, I'm
senior
kidding.
center garden
No.
club might get involved.
so.
Didn't they say at one time this was designed for ice skating or something out there?
They actually use it. If you talk to the highway superintendent, they used to
Yeah.
go fishing and ice skating on that. They'll tell you many years ago. I
And
don't know if you knew that or not.
doesn't ice over because it's polluted.
Yeah, I mean, we have to make a decision.
No,
If
I
it's-
mean, that's what we're cleaning up.
If we clean it up and it becomes frozen,
Yeah.
then maybe we need to have a conversation. Is
Right.
this a potential ice skating location? If it is, then we don't want to fence the whole thing in.
I mean,
Right.
there-
Well, put a gate on the
Well, you
fence.
could.
I see
yeah,
it
you
as,
could
I-
do that.
there's two potential ice skating locations, one here and one at Reese Park, which used to be
Right, it
ice
used to be
skating
at
pond.
Reese Park, yeah.
And that's a beautiful one, needs to be
Needs to be cleaned
dredged,
up.
The oth-
cleaned up, but,
the other part-
which is another park that really is in sore need. We don't have it on the list, intended to, but
Yeah.
that's one, particularly the bridge.
The other
That
thing
goes-
we need to
right,
think
Steve?
about-
You've been on that for a while.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
destroyed. So we need to get a new bridge up.
Well,
The
that
other thing we
bridge-
want to talk about from a Rockingham Pond perspective, sorry to cut you off, Bill, is
No, go ahead.
an aerator. So one of the things we talked about was getting an aerator there as well, because that'll also help. So as we go through this company called Solid 2, we'll get their recommendations, but I think one of the things, and they also do, again, aerators, that might be something as well to think about. So that'll help continue to keep the water purified, et cetera.
But, Reeves Park, though, I will raise it, and I know Steve wants to get, but now that we're looking at the EPA getting close to cleaning up the South Creek, and also the bleachery area, but the South Creek's opens up, and Reese is willing to, set aside, land But Reese Park has been sorely neglected, and also that's where, Bill, as you know, the highway, putting asphalt or doing something there for accessing that. But the biggest issue, I think, right now, because it's a safety hazard too, is the footbridge across the chasm.
Yeah, we've got
Right,
that
Steve?
closed.
Yeah, I know it's closed, but that doesn't mean anything.
No, but
Right.
yeah, I mean.
But we need to get it
that's-
replaced. Tim's looked at it, right? Tim, you've looked at where new footings could be and, how we can get that in place. That's-
Wasn't that destroyed in a storm?
Yes,
Yeah.
a big tree came down and knocked it. And then the footings have been eroded away as the torrents of water go down Hunters Creek there.
The other thing we
Get
gotta think
any
about if
funding
we're
for
talking
that?
about bridges and footings is
I don't
Airport
think the
Drive.
insurance company
Those
was
bridges
aware
that go
of it, so it
across, I
wasn't
don't know if
covered
Steve
on
does
the
that or not.
policy.
I'll ask him in a second. Do you maintain the bridges that go across Airport Drive? So in other words, there's bridges, so you go from, one
Across
side of the soccer field to the
Yeah,
other?
that's on my list here.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah.
Why don't you
Because a
go
lot of
through your
residents
list?
have been asking about that too, 'cause that's a
Right now,
safety
Steve.
issue.
Go through your list, but I think Bill, come back to Reese Park as one, Angela, has Castle Point, certainly she wants to look at. But
And
Steve,
we'll-
go through your list.
And we'll talk about Marksfield later,
Yeah,
too.
Yeah, no, that's on the list here.
We started with the barn, and a recent development that I didn't get a chance to put on here is our blacktop. It took a tremendous beating this year. It's crumbled. It's pretty much gravel at this point. And then I wanted to, let's look further down. You want to do it building by building, or do you want to follow this list?
Maybe hit the big, what are bigger capital items that you
Yeah,
see
okay.
as a top priority. I know you've had the list before and you've made some good progress, but I think the priority ones that you see
Right.
are a must this year.
Well, the ones that I feel are a high priority is, the carriage house. If we want to preserve that carriage house, it really needs to have some work done to it. The roof, to start with, the windows need to be replaced, and then the bricks need to be repointed with mortar. And, that's going to be a significant expense, but that building has a lot of potential, and it's something that we actually use now for storage.
And as I mentioned earlier, 2 organizations are interested in perhaps.
Right.
Actually, 3.
Now, as a sidebar to that proposal, if we get displaced with our stores, we're going to need to figure something out
Understood.
for that.
Yeah.
The next biggest item on here is Town Hall. We've talked about replacing these tile floors here that are original to the building, and I expect that would run about $100,000. Then the next biggest thing is.
And
the-
this room, as I think everybody knows now, is being used quite actively, particularly by our seniors,
Zumba, yeah.
for various
Yeah.
club activities and more traffic. And there are a couple areas where they get their shoes or what have you caught, especially out in the hallway. So,
Then the pavement, we've talked about redesigning the traffic flow, and the pavement, again, is original to the building and is in deteriorating condition.
I think there, and particularly as we've seen, with COVID and our actual use with respect to COVID, as far as handing out test kits, a variety of things, the traffic flow becomes even more important. But also the entranceway, right, going out to, Middle Bush Road. And in talking with DPW before, they were willing to consider widening that. It's very narrow for two-way traffic. And
It
as
is.
we saw, actually, during the COVID kit distribution, some bottleneck, is formed there. But if we had the flow going around, and then we've talked about widening the path that goes to the emergency services building, raising that a little bit so that there can be emergency access, as well, through that.
Is that something, and I'll ask Jim this, is this something that we can, like if we're gonna do, say, a Robinson Lane or a Rockingham, is that money that we're gonna allocate, we could also, I guess, pay it out of the B fund, but is that something that Mike Sheehan can do, or does that have to be something separate if we're gonna redo Town Hall? Can that be
So
part of it?
Town
Because it's
Hall-
not really a
Town Hall
dedicated.
is a fund,
There's plenty.
so, town hall is a farm unless you make.
Dedicate it as a highway,
As
a roadway.
highway, right. But,
you could-
you, Mike can certainly, I mean, I don't know if Mike, I mean, as Steve had mentioned, you're better off having it paved with a paver and, you know, I don't know. I don't believe Mike's got that
No.
capability.
No, Mike's patched it, that's about,
Right.
you know, and I think we're getting to the point where we don't patch it much longer either.
There had been talk in the past, and I'm not sure whether it was with your group or with Morris beforehand, about grinding up the existing pavement into the underlayment and making that the sub-base, and then starting from scratch with pavement on top. I don't, you know, that's something that had been spoken about in the past. There's also another procedure where you can mix, blend more, concrete into, cement, into the gravel at the same time, and it stiffens it up. I've seen that done as well. But, you know, something, again, I'll have to work with Tim on.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the
Come up with a
millings,
plan.
give mixed results. It's like, you want to get a processed milling that's a kind of a uniform size. If you get deteriorating pavement that's like gatoring, when they try to mill that, it's just big chunks come out the other end, so it doesn't really work that well. Part A. Part B, we've seen it where too much millings in there, it gets hot underneath and it starts to warp. It does, you know, the heat can really affect it. So I think you really got to look at what kind of sub-base do you have. And the
Yeah,
problem
I'm
we're
not-
having here is, you know, we start with the road, the pavement's bad, and then we talk about the flow, then we talk about widening the entrances, and then we talked about connecting the ESB, and then we talked about like the park memorial out front.
Sure.
And it all just kind of like snowballs to a pretty significant
Yeah, big number.
cost, you know.
Well, I guess the other question is, what's the condition of, you know, it's a pretty wet site. What's the condition of the subbase? Is it,
That's what I'm saying. Is there even sub-base or subsoil? I mean, in the back by the generators is probably the lowest spot and it's the worst spot.
Well,
Yeah,
from what we've seen about all the issues that keep popping up, my guess is it's substandard at best.
Probably the Hydrix.
it's on the wetland in the back.
Yeah.
We've kicked around the ideas of renovating the town clerk and the assessor's office, making them more conducive to bringing people in and out of the hallways, rather than wait in the hallways, have waiting areas in the office area. You know, depending on how extravagant we were going to get with that, I threw a number on there of 40,000 had it been contracted out. I think that number's probably low at this point. It's probably going to be quite a bit more than that to contract it out. In-house, we could do it, but it would have to be, you know, we'd have to figure out the priority on that. I would imagine that we could do it for probably around $10,000–$15,000 in materials and the labor.
To me, the most important thing really on this, as far as any renovation in the town hall space, is what you have on the second page, and that's windows that can pop out, escape windows, because virtually every single area is not escapable if something is out, the fire is out in the hallway. You know, you look at every, you know, one of the buildings, rooms, right? You know, we have some significant problems. You know, so that, you know, when they replaced the windows, they didn't think about popping, and Steve wasn't consulted, so.
Yeah, I spoke with, boy, I'm drawing blanks here tonight. Wilson, I spoke with Wilson earlier today, and he says you guys are pretty close to having
Yeah, unfortunately, we got
solid
three
numbers
prices
on that.
and they're all over the board, so we're trying to weigh
Yeah.
the best. You know,
The barn I spoke about already. Carnwath is a, you know, there's a lot going on down there. The admin building has a temporary repair on the roof to a storm, I think that was in 2018. Windstorm ripped off a section of roof. It's got a temporary repair on it. I don't anticipate that to last a whole lot longer.
Well, and then we found out that the
Right.
repair was not properly done, and you
Well, the
can't.
roof was not installed properly,
Yes.
which the remainder of the roof is likely not installed properly either.
And the
So
contractor's out of
the
business.
way I think we should handle this is do a full roof on it,
Yeah.
rather than patch it and then have to go back and patch it again.
And
'Cause
Steve tried to track down the contractor to, and
And, yeah,
insurance
they're gone.
couldn't, they were long gone.
So what do we use the building for? Who uses that building?
What is the use? There's a bunch of stuff in there from the Historical Society at this point.
But I'd say right now, there's no planned activities, which, again, you know, is something
But this
that-
would be a preservation
No.
thing, if we don't
We
do
certainly
something,
should- can look
then
at
the
it.
building will end up in the same condition that the mansion's in.
But nobody uses that building at all right now.
Not regularly, no,
No.
I don't,
No.
you know, it's certainly usable.
Has
It's
Oh, I know, I
certainly
know.
Yeah.
Potential, it's all up to code and everything ready, you know, it's all there, active,
Right.
water, heater, everything, Steve keeps it up.
I mean, it wouldn't be hard to use it for office space of
Yeah.
some sort.
Or storage space.
Yeah, well, not so much storage. Well, I guess the trouble is, there's, to carry files and things like that up and downstairs, which, that building's got two floors above the main floor. And even to get into the first floor, you have to go up, probably about 8 feet from grade.
I'm just trying to think of alternatives, because I know we're short on storage space, and we've
Right.
got some that are, if we don't move stuff around, documents will be damaged. So I'm just trying to think if there's alternatives, and that building's in good shape, which I think
It is in good
That's what I
shape,
thought.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Stuff is supposed
I
to
think
be
the
put
biggest
on
problem
ways.
there is there's no internal elevator, so you can't carry stuff up, so you have to use other technology
So
to adopt.
I'm a little confused. I thought all our records were being dumped onto microfiche to get rid of hard copies. Why do we have hard copies? For what reason? Why are we keeping
I
them?
can't answer that question.
I can answer that question. There's other departments that do not use Laserfiche.
Why not? Do we know?
Ask them, the building
Okay.
department, the town court,
Okay.
and the different departments don't use it.
Okay, but we should be, God forbid, there's a fire, everything's gonna be gone, correct?
Right. We
So-
don't own the records of the court or the
No, I'm
building
not,
department.
let's say the court is gonna be responsible for whatever. I'm sure they have a backup plan like the rest of the courts, hopefully in the county. However, for departments in the town hall, other than the court, this should be all be backing up somewhere. And I thought they were being scanned. And if it's not, that's something what we need to do, so we don't have all these papers. And we have to worry about
Well,
storage.
We're running out of storage space for records.
Am I correct or what? This should all be, there's no legal reason why we need to have hard copy.
On the retention schedule there, there's maybe some deeds and there's a handful
Well,
of
the deeds are up in the
things.
county, right?
Yeah, there's.
So
certain-
it doesn't
I mean,
have,
the New York State Archives puts out a list
Mhm.
of documents that we're required to keep in a period of time that we're not required to keep. Microfiche or digital copies are permitted. I don't have the retention schedule ahead of me, but, in front of me, but there's a handful of documents that cannot be, but again, it's not.
but you said a key word, a handful of documents versus
Right.
boxes and boxes and boxes. I think that's something this
I mean,
board
the problem-
needs to look at and implement quickly, because it's gonna save money, and we won't need all this space.
The big issue is staff to do it.
I'm sure maybe we can address that with some people that we have in town hall, or even volunteers,
So,
or even a high school student,
yeah, no, I mean, it's.
or something, or even the seniors may want to be able to give them a chance to learn how to use the systems. So I think that's something we need to discuss
I agree.
as a board.
For the
This way,
interior,
this
you
way
have
we won't need all
$50,000.
this documentation.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, well,
For
we've been
the
working on
interior,
it, you know, that's the people
$50,000.
issue.
Okay,
We had interns doing it, but
Too many people talking.
One more time, yeah, I can't, when there's multiple.
For the admin building
Sorry.
and the interior, you have $50,000?
Well, yeah, at one point, there was some interest in renovating the interior. Until we have a solid plan, then, yeah, I would
Yeah,
put
yeah, I
that, I
just-
think I got that down there as a fairly low priority.
Okay, I didn't know if you had something in mind already.
No,
Okay.
at one point, there was.
Right, that was just
The
on the
idea
list.
floated of having a caretaker down there, and we were gonna put an apartment on the second floor.
Okay.
That's where that came from. And again, once there is a plan for the place, then we can actually put some numbers together on what we need to do to make it work, that plan.
Who has keys to that building?
I do. I have a key to the front door.
I have keys to the
Okay.
door too. But we think that there's another set floating around.
Because one of the requests that we've made, and Angela actually made it, was to get keys to
Right.
all of the buildings.
The town,
So,
right, the town board members should know who
yeah,
has
so I know-
what keys.
Yeah,
Maria's putting
and
that
Maria now
together.
is putting together a new
yeah,
list.
so I
and
spoke to her about that.
Well, we should do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, there are a number of keys that are unaccounted for, and that's what we're trying to
And
change
if,
right now.
and if they are unaccounted
Yeah.
for, we change the locks.
That's exactly where I'm
That's
going
Well,
with
we're,
it. Yeah.
we're in the
Yeah.
process of doing that here
Yeah,
at Town
yeah.
Hall.
Yep.
As soon as the materials come in, we're gonna have that done
Yeah.
and.
Just make sure we get keys.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Well,
no,
there's been a
absolutely.
time that we didn't.
Well, I don't hand them out.
Well, there's a
I've
time where we
ordered
had
enough
no keys.
for
They were-
everybody, but,
So
I
it
don't
doesn't
hand them
happen
out.
again, so this way, God forbid, there's an emergency and we need to get in there, we
So the
can.
other talk too was, like we did at companies like IBM and TI, et cetera, we had badge readers. Was there any talk about doing badge readers here too?
I've looked into that as well.
It's expensive though, right?
It's about $1,200 per door.
But you would only need one door. Everybody comes in the same
Yeah,
door.
start- we
Right
can
now,
start
that's
with
why
the-
we've limited it, to try to
Yeah, we can
restrict it.
start
So
with
yes,
one
we
door.
Because
can.
now you
And,
can see
you
when
know,
people
move
coming
out
in
from
and out of
there.
the building, and it's,
Right. In these
But,
doors, we,
Well, it's $1,200 per door, and there's about $5,000 for the control system. But then, control system, then each exterior door is about.
and then the
$12
badge
per
reader
door.
helps us keep track who is coming
Right,
in and
right.
out. And
It'll lock
as you
people
said,
in
I
and
mean,
out.
corporations all do that,
And they've got them now to where
It's
you
very
don't even have to
sophisticated.
take it out. You just
You don't
walk
even,
up to the door.
actually, as far as the door, if you want to see who's coming in, you just put a little sensor right in the ceiling or on the wall, and that
Right.
tracks, that doesn't control the access, but it controls who's going in. I mean,
I know that's not part of your list,
no,
but
but I agree with
But
you.
we have looked into it.
Back
you
to
know,
the key
we-
issue,
We
it's
got dinged by the
related.
State Department of Labor for
Right.
security here. and,
It's one of the
that was something we looked
workforce
into.
hazard things that we've been trying to address, right? And just like the safety escape windows and so forth.
And everybody has a badge.
And the other thing that you don't have, but, I know you've been looking into, but we had talked about, is getting, at least for building department, a similar window scheme that Leanne has, right? A secured window that is both, I thought you were
Okay.
looking into it, right? As
I
putting,
thought that was the town clerk. I don't recall.
No,
the
it's
building
Barbara's
department,
building
but,
department, yes.
Yeah, I can.
similar to what we've done to the court
I can
and
get that
what we've done
rolling,
to Leanne and so
Yeah.
forth. Because they deal with a lot of people, and also that's easy to pop out, and sometimes they're not all that polite.
Okay.
So that, to me, is
Bless
top
you.
priority. Joe is overall, depending on how you revamp the office and what you do, but
Right.
he has an insecure area as well. So
Okay.
those are the two areas that have the lion's share of work regularly, then the tax assessor has other, which also has files that need to be preserved differently. But I think, Steve, continue, so we can
Yeah, I'm
get
just
through
looking
your
to see if
list.
there's any
One
other
of the
big
things
ticket
we
items
were
here.
talking about earlier, and I know it's on here, is the bathroom floors out at Robinson Lane. We had talked about, didn't we allocate some money, for
no,
painting
we
numbers?
didn't. What we talked about is originally, it was too expensive to do it
Yeah, he
9,000.
wanted to-
We had volunteers that were gonna do it just if we got the paint.
Right.
So we can probably still get that rather than spend $9,000
Yeah.
on painting floors. And that's all they're gonna do. They're not
Yeah,
gonna do the nice floor you
it's
talked
just- Some of
about.
this is a wish list.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. Yeah, but that's
sooner or later,
something
we
else
may
that
have
would be
to
nice
do-
to have done
Yeah.
before opening day.
Yeah, I think, the general house cleaning it up, making it look nicer.
Yep, yep.
So we covered the big ticket items. The only way I'm gonna be able to keep track now is to go down the list.
Yeah, go ahead,
Okay.
Steve,
And
go
we'll
through.
skip over the
Move-
ones we've
move
already
quickly
done.
through.
Carriage House, we talked about. Oh, we didn't talk about the road down there. The asphalt on that road down there isn't in much better shape than
Right.
any of the other parks. And I believe that if we're gonna do that, then we ought to look at the storm drains that are there
I
as
think it
well,
gets
see
back
what
to
kind-
Bill's point. I mean, we look at the key parts, Castle Point, the roadway, system. We have a number of these parks that actually aren't all that usable because we don't have a good
Right.
entrance, system, the gate system, all that, continues to be a key element. Who opens the gates, who shuts them, and so forth, right? But
Security cameras.
security
We should have
cameras,
security
right.
cameras
We're-
at every
we-
park.
Yeah, well, it's a work in progress.
yeah, Steve's been doing
We
a
can't get
good
them all done
job.
at
once.
But I
I
think
know.
with respect to
I
the
know,
paving,
but-
we look at it and then we can choose, the priorities, but at least in the plan for 3 to 5 years, 3 years, I think in this case, 2 to 3 years at most, we should get all these parks, the access points, taken care of. That's a safety issue as much as it is other.
Tim covered most of the Reese building, so we'll move on to Castle Point. Down there, it's just a very thin aluminum garage door on the place, and I would like to put a steel roll-up there just to make it more secure. It's not all that expensive, and I'm actually looking into that. I'm moving that down to something we could do in-house at about a third of the cost. Then the pavilion roof should probably be replaced, and I'd like to paint the building. Need to put a new basketball hoop on the court up there at the playground area. The brush we've been working on, to replace the bleachers for the softball field.
Yes, because we talked about that for several years.
Yeah,
We need to
we're
get
probably
that
looking at
Benches.
3,000 there.
Yep. The
Um,
benches, right? You also
yeah,
have to put
yeah.
the new benches
Right.
that you have.
I think we took the truck body out of there already. It was being used for storage at one time and was falling apart, but
Oh,
I'm
really?
pretty sure we got that out of there
Okay.
now. Grading the driveway, I figure we need somewhere in the area of $1,500 worth of material. We could do that. I've got the machine at the shop that could do the work.
Is the memorial still in good shape? The flagpole area and so forth?
That was
Yeah.
rebuilt
That was
not too
rebuilt a
That's
few years
okay.
ago.
Yeah,
That's okay?
that's
Okay.
okay.
And then the steps going up to the pavilion are in pretty rough shape and probably ought to get replaced. I figure probably about $1,000 in materials for that.
The equipment that's out there.
Well,
There's a
in
little-
my mind, that's a park that has been sorely neglected along with
Equipment?
The
Reese.
kids'
So
equipment,
we need to,
the kids play.
Oh, the playground
Playground.
equipment? It's old. I mean, it's not in bad
well, is it
condition, but it's not.
approaching
it's
Quiet
not-
Acres old, or?
It's
I think
old.
so, it's very
Yeah.
old.
No, it's old.
Yeah, yeah,
That
it's
should be
old.
replaced.
Also, at one point, I had brought up the outfield fence at the softball field there,
Mm-hmm.
and that still needs, should be replaced. There is a fence that's pretty much tore down at this point that was at the lower field. I don't know whether that fence needs to be there or not. I'm not
I don't
sure.
know.
I don't know if anybody else plays
don't
there.
know.
They
That
use the
field isn't-
softball field,
We're not
that's all.
maintaining that field
Yeah,
any longer.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
So I haven't seen it used. I don't know that there's a need to replace it, but I
Probably
probably
not
ought
that
to take
one,
it
but
out.
the other one
if-
there probably
if,
needs to be.
We're not gonna,
There was
Again,
Again,
talk,
I'd defer to Jessica, because she probably knows, did they use the softball field down there last year? Okay.
there was also talk about a dog park.
Yeah.
There's interest in that, and we don't have one in this town.
right. Well, that's a decision you folks have to
Okay.
make.
I think that's something this
No.
town board needs to
Hey,
talk about.
and Jerry still thinks that the area behind, Carnwath, Reese Cultural Building is a good one, flat, a lot of place. And since there's all sorts of dogs there, and also that's his biggest challenge of unleashed dogs.
Oh,
And
right.
there
They,
too.
they
But-
ride horses
But
down there.
Castle
too.
Point is
Yeah.
used quite often.
Yeah, no, I know, I'm not
People
disagreeing with it, I'm
dogs,
just
yeah.
saying.
Yeah,
I've
a
seen
lot of
horses
people
down there before,
bring
too.
Their,
Yeah.
what? I'm sorry, what?
I've seen horses down there,
Yeah,
people riding
horses
horses.
are not supposed to be down there at all.
I told them, talk to your councilman, no kidding.
Yes, they are not allowed down there. But yes, the dog park would be something that could be used down there also. They're not using that park for baseball,
Yeah.
softball, soccer.
I will
So let's
cover,
talk about that at one of our meetings.
quiet, I'm gonna move on to Quiet Acres.
Can I
here.
stop you at March for a second?
Yeah, but.
So I have
we
a
need to
couple
do
of
that.
things down there.
At Castle Point?
No, Mart's.
That's after Castle Point.
Well,
Well, he already
I'm still
told
on
you
the
about
first
the
page
horse.
here, so I was gonna
Oh.
get to March.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm not skipping over it, I'm just following the list
Okay.
here, and then we'll eventually get to all of them.
Okay.
Quiet Acres, there's a fence between the playground and
Oh, I see.
the
Just go through
neighbor
the-
that is on Helen Drive that is in bad condition. It's been damaged by trees coming down and such, that needs to be replaced. That's something I would have to contract out. I put a price on it, I thought I had. I think it's probably in the area of 5,000.
Well, you have, on this, the other page where you have more detail,
Right.
pavilion roof, building roof.
Yep, that's what I'm
painting,
getting to now.
cameras,
This is the stuff we could do in-house.
Right.
Hey,
The-
Steve, just a point. I know you guys are busy, and you don't have a chance to get out to all these parks. They're there mowing every week. If they could just tell you, Steve, there's a net down at
They're
Quiet
supposed to
Acres."
be doing that, yeah.
They don't, we all
Yeah, I
know
know.
that. If you could just remind them.
Yeah.
Because then we don't have to hear 3 months later.
Right.
"Ah, it's been down for 3 months, and
Right.
your guys are there every week. So if you could just remind them, thank you.
Yep. The pavilion roof, both, there's an outbuilding there. The pavilion roof and that outbuilding roof need to be replaced. It also needs a little bit of trim work. I'd like to paint both of them and install security cameras. Yeah.
I want security cameras.
So, the trouble is, a lot of these parks are not set up currently to make that work. We don't have a internet connection there, and that's something we're gonna have to figure out how to put that in place. But yeah, it's on the list here that I'd like to get, and then eventually wanted to get cameras in all our parks. Actually, all town facilities, I believe, at this day and age should be
Well,
covered.
the parks, I'm a little bit more concerned about because of children.
Right. Reese Park, we spoke about that bridge that's out in
Right,
the
that's
woods.
a key.
That crosses the stream.
We have to do that.
Yeah,
There's also, we have, and I had a number of discussions with the headmaster, Randolph School. They use the park a lot.
They do.
And they
I wasn't
cross
aware of
over,
that.
yeah, and I think that bridge has to be a top priority to get in
Right.
place before
they're
anything
probably
else.
crossing it, yeah.
Yeah, well, no, they're going down the banks, and so forth,
Okay.
it's.
At Reese Park, there's another truck body that's being used. Well, I don't know whether it's being used or not. I don't have keys to it. I don't know what's in it. I don't know what it was ever used for, but there's a truck body there. It's not in real good condition. So I don't
get
know
it
if that's
out.
something that I can take out of there.
We don't know what it's being used for.
It may be Greenway. I'm not,
Oh.
I'm not 100% on that.
Well, we can check with the trail wardens and
Yeah.
see. I'll check with them.
A general cleanup of the park, the fallen debris and stuff, that's on our list to do. And again, I mentioned that a second time, that bridge. Robinson, we spoke about, let me just double check that there's anything we didn't talk. The bleachers. Some bleachers are aluminum already and in good condition, but about half of them are wooden and, deteriorated. And I figure somewhere around somewhere probably between 18, 25,000 would end up replacing all the wooden bleachers with aluminum. What I've been doing, rather than going a 5-tier, because now the safety law is if you go over 3 tiers high, you have to have a cage around it. I've been going with longer units
just
that
3.
are 3 tiers high.
That's smart.
So we avoid that.
Sure.
A lot less expensive.
Thank you.
Dugout roofs, they're all getting to the point where they need to be replaced again. I figure that's probably about 26,000. We got a couple of them that are beyond repair because the concrete has heaved and they should be taken down and replaced. And then there's some grading work that we need to do. We had to do some exploratory excavating for the project out there, and we just need to go back and touch those areas up again from settling. Spook, we pretty much spoke about everything there. That project is still continuing. Town Hall, I mentioned the floor here. What else do I have down for that?
Some fascia work?
Excuse me?
You have some fascia work?
Yeah, some of the fascia, and it's kind of unique, but it's aluminum over plywood, and some of the aluminum on it is blistering. So we're gonna need to, look at that and see what we can do to make that a better condition.
Good.
It's been requested to run power over to the gazebo. I guess they're hosting quite a few weddings over there.
Yeah, and other events, and the
Yeah,
seniors
so
and so
that's
forth,
something
so
we're looking
definitely.
into.
And security camera.
Previously, there was a separate meter over there that cost us $40 a month just to have the meter activated, plus the electricity that's used. So I'm looking into running a bore underground to tie into our system here, would eliminate that monthly charge.
That's good.
Pressure wash, yeah, the front of the building here has some mildew on it, and we want to pressure wash that and get that to looking nice. The fascia we just mentioned. Airport, I'm going to go back to that. I want to replace the footbridges that you mentioned that are over the swale.
Yep.
Bleachers, I want to take care of all the bleachers out there as well. I figured that to run around 6,000. Want to paint the outbuilding there and pavilion to make everything match. And then the concession window counters are from Mica and probably original to the building. They're falling apart, so that's something I think we need to replace. The barn, we spoke about that already. Carnwath, we covered most of that. Cameras, I've got cameras at Carnwath in the Reese building and the admin building. And I have the cameras in hand for the carriage house. But we have to get those installed yet. And then I'm working with Craig on
Wi-Fi.
getting network connection between the three buildings. Grounds, I need to do some work on that front gate. The post that it hangs on has settled or something. It's not opening correctly. And then we have dead trees all over the property that we've been working on steady. There's a pavilion between the Reese building and the carriage house that there had been some interest in getting that fixed up. What I'd like to do, rather than make it a screen building, just take the screens out. They are in poor condition and kind of invite vandalism. So just make that an open air pavilion. Make some minor repairs to the trim work and then paint it, replace the roof on that. The pump house up on top of the hill there, the door has rusted pretty badly and would need to be replaced. I figured that would cost about $2,000. Castle Point, I think we covered that,
Yeah, we
correct?
covered those.
We went
Yeah.
down on that. Yeah.
Mart's is the big one.
March now, yes. I want to complete the memorial move. Now, what I have noticed is right directly across from the memorial is a huge oak tree. And I think that ought to come down, otherwise it's going to continuously throw debris into the memorial area and interfere with the flag. That's something we could handle ourselves. I can make it so it doesn't.
So that kind of goes with the other tree we want to take down on the other side.
We're
of the course.
actually going to have that done next week.
Good, great.
Yeah, the big
The
hickory
last.
tree next to the
Yep.
tennis courts is scheduled to come down next week, weather permitting. That one on front, we can handle ourselves. Replace the fascia. We tried a new type of fascia when we renovated the outbuilding, and we're not quite happy with how that turned out, and I want to revisit that. We put the water line in, we had to cut the asphalt to do that, and I'm going to talk with Mike about patching that. And then the big pavilion, they put the storage units on the ends and left the top of the trusses open. That's an attraction to the kids to get up there and sit on the top of the storage area. So I want to just enclose that so that they can't get up in there and do that. They just get up there and do things they shouldn't be doing.
Jessica, do you need anything for summer camp? Anything else than what's on Steve's list?
I mean, we've always talked about lighting at Marks, but that's not really something that's camp sensitive. We have to just talk about some interior painting.
Okay.
Office. That's really it.
Actually, I was going to talk to you about the lighting. I know those lights probably haven't worked in 10, 15
Which
years.
ones?
The ones over by the tennis court,
Right.
on by the Pie Lane side there, where they play pickleball.
Yeah.
And I think basketball has lights
The
back there
basket-
too.
yeah, that's why I asked which ones, because there's
Yeah, so the
floodlights for
ones,
both.
so what we're trying to do is, number one, I want to make sure, and I know we talked about this, by the way, thanks for putting the windscreen in, that was great. Now we want to get the nets put in next year, the new nets. I know we waited
Right.
because of the winter time, but we also want to make sure that one court becomes designated as a pickleball court. So the front one, we talked about doing that,
Oh,
making that
dropping
specific.
it?
Yeah, so dropping it and then doing what we need to do, so, residents are looking for that too. But again, the lights, going back to the lights, if we could figure out what the issue is with the lights, I don't know if we need Central Hudson in there or whatever, but I'd like to kind of get a cost, I don't know if that's you or Central Hudson or somebody
Well,
else, to see if we
I'll
can get
have
them.
our electrician look at it first
Okay,
and go from there. Need to analyze what we have, whether or not it's a workable system anymore. It may not be. I
it
don't,
may not be, and then,
yeah.
then it becomes a cost-effective,
Right.
Item we take a look at, but if
And
it's something
those
where.
are the old style, I believe they're the mercury vapor lights that are up there.
They have
Right,
timers on
that's
those too?
correct.
Do you know?
No, there isn't.
Oh.
That's, that's something that would have to be, it worked on. Well, I actually had put a layout together, because Jessica had mentioned some nighttime use of the park that would have timers. And, it would be lighting under the pavilion. We'd have to light the restroom area, just, so they could go back and forth between the pavilion and the restroom, and then lighting for the parking areas, and then along the walkway so they can get to the parking area safely. It was a pretty involved thing. And then that could be controlled by timers or over the internet remotely. And, we could look at the floodlights then at the same time as part of that plan.
NYSERDA and New York Power Authority have certain programs, grant programs, assistance programs, financing programs. I don't know if you want to take a look.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and when I talked
It's
with,
not gonna be inexpensive to do it, that's for
talked
sure.
with Central Hudson, they were willing to look at us through their foundation, for that, and Robinson Lane, so again,
Yeah,
we
that's the
should
other one I was going to
dust
ask
that
about
off.
too, the Robinson Lane one too, because we've been
Right.
trying to get a light out there by the pond forever. And there
And
is a
Rockingham.
hookup, I know
We
you
have
actually.
the pole out
Yeah,
there.
you have the pole number out there.
Where at?
Robinson Lane?
Rockingham.
Oh, sorry, Rockingham.
Rockingham,
Rockingham,
yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you had the pole number there, so that's
Right.
something else we're looking at too, especially if we're thinking about potentially
Well, if
asphalt.
you're gonna run an aerator, you gotta have power.
Yeah, yeah.
That's right. And then for parking, as
Parking lot too, if we decide to do
It's-
some of the asphalt out there, if we
Yeah.
have, I might go out there and do more.
Can you retrofit the lighting out there at Mart's? You have the lighting poles and all. Can you retrofit those heads?
That's something I wanna look at with the electrician, because I don't know what condition, I think a lot of those bulbs are broken.
I mean, most of these programs that are out there now are LED.
Yeah.
LED conversions, yeah. We've done that all internally, but at the time, they weren't offering exterior lighting, so that may have changed. Quiet Acres, back to that, did I go through the whole thing? Yeah, I did go
Yeah,
through the
we've
whole
gone
thing on
through
that.
all
I'm
those.
sorry.
Yeah.
And we spoke about Reese.
Yeah,
I think we talked about Robinson.
yeah. I think we've covered them. Steve.
Yeah, the only thing I didn't mention was at Rockingham, I'm not sure, I gotta talk with Mike Tremper and find out what the purpose of this thing is, but there's a pit that is block wall, it's made out of cinder blocks, and it's down about 4 feet, and I've currently got a concrete cover over it, but those blocks have deteriorated. And it's gonna either need to be filled in or rebuilt, and I gotta find out which, you know, what.
Where are the blocks at?
You know where I made the elevation?
Yes.
And you go around the curve, as soon as you get to the end of my work there, it's to the left, and in maybe 20 feet off the pavement.
Ah, okay.
It's between that area and the pond. And there's some pipes in there, and I don't know what they do.
Yeah, Mike will be able to help you.
Yeah, I think so. They may know what
Yeah.
that's for.
Slot house.
Yeah, I'm looking to see, make sure I covered everything at Rockingham. Schlott House, I need to do some grading of some previous work that we did to dress that up and seed it. Tree removal, I'm pretty sure we took care of that already. There were some, those spruces had died and needed to come down. We got that done. You know, we've talked about drainage for the community day field. We're in
And
the
CPL is doing
Yeah.
analysis right
Well,
now.
we're in the same boat there, you know, we have to have a place to run the water to. And that, being so level there, that is actually the low
Well,
spot
you know, I
already.
think the first issue is, you know, with respect to the Carney Company, they need to have, if they're going to bring in better equipment, which they're interested,
Yeah, they
very
need
willing
solid
to do,
ground.
they need to have some pads built, you know, that may not, you know, the first phase would not be necessarily drainage, but putting in pads, you know, and identifying those, right? You know, we have the contract done, and so we want to get them out there and say, where would you put your Ferris wheel? Where would
You
you
mean to
put?
support the
Right,
weight of the
to
To support the right, they
Planning
can't do
ahead.
it in
Yeah.
that ground.
Yep.
But we can put in, you know, maybe it's an asphalt-based item for something that at least then would stabilize it. So that I think is a top priority. Drainage, you know, Tim and Wilson and them are looking at what could be done out there. So,
There's been
Know about
ideas
that,
floated
too.
of putting
Good,
permanent
because they do
wiring
get a
into
fair
the Christmas
discount.
displays. That's something we could do.
and, you know, I think the bigger, you know, issue is, you know, the band shell. I mean, that's a
Yeah,
turtle shape,
that's-
electricity, you know, the roof, everything, I think.
That looks horrible.
Floor, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what
Definitely
extent you
do a
want to go
before
to on
and
that
after
stage.
picture
I
on
mean, we
that.
could repair and make it look a little bit better than it is, but, you know, it's not,
What do you think would be a cost to replace the entire thing?
Yeah,
yeah,
Knock down the old one and put a new one in.
I couldn't even think about that. Probably have to talk with Tim on that.
Because the amount of repairs it
It-
needs,
it
I mean,
is
between electrical and some other things, I mean, it's,
Well, we were
Looks like-
looking into a portable amphitheater for Carnwood. So
Right.
maybe you could demo that and then do the amphitheater between the two sites.
That's what they do up at the fair.
They have these, you know,
They
really
bring in-
good trailers, movable, right to, I mean, that's what we're looking at with the right cost.
for styles.
That's right, yeah, so she uses it pretty regularly.
at least so we can make it look a little nicer, maybe clean up, because, I mean, there's no gutters on the back of that thing.
Right.
There's, I mean,
And there's no
electrical
wall
units.
on the back of it.
Yeah, so there's electrical out there, I mean,
Yeah.
I think we should have an electrician go out there and take a look at it.
More and more people interested in renting.
Yeah, especially if you have more and more people, it's a
We
safety
have to
issue.
make sure it's structurally it's sound.
Yeah,
Right.
No,
I agree.
Yeah, and
Be a
the
good
walls, the
sport.
floor, and the roof. And then the electricity, that can be done at the same time, right, Steve, as you're looking out, taking the line out to
Oh,
the
yeah.
Christmas trees and
And then
memorial
the
site,
other side of the park.
right?
Well, that's a different story.
But anyway, it's, that to me
A
is,
while back, we had a tree offered to us. I didn't know if there's any.
Yeah, I was
John
gonna ask you about
Lawrence.
John
Visiting.
Lawrence.
John Lawrence had offered.
Yeah, is that
So,
something
we
you're
can-
interested in looking at
I think we
again, or-
should.
What
yeah.
tree would you replace if you're gonna do it, though? Not the one that you like today, right? It's a different one?
Well, that's something we probably ought to have a field visit and figure out where you want the.
Because he's gonna do it,
Town
we
tree
just
to
gotta
be.
get it there and plant it, right?
Right.
Yeah,
We had
Right.
something
I had
like-
talked to
You gotta hope it
the
grows.
guy who would do the transplant, and then he figured about 2,000 to move the tree.
And how do you transport it there from John's property to?
Well,
That's the
what they do, John,
transport.
you know,
that's
John
what it is?
Baisley or others, when we put them in, you
They
know,
call it a
they'll,
spade
they get the
machine?
big spade
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
carry it in the spade over.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, we probably ought to have a powwow out there and figure out
Right.
how we want the Christmas display to go and pick the proper
Right.
spot for the tree, and then take the other ones down.
Agree.
South Fowler House,
And also the Christmas light displays, some of them are in real need of rebuilding, right? You know, like the Islamic
that's a
one.
touchy
the-
subject.
Well, you know,
yeah,
you know, I
it's-
think we have to look at that.
Yeah, those have been provided by
I know.
the folks that they represent.
Well, we can approach those, but I
Yeah.
think we need to know
Yeah.
what is it, you know, how bad they are. We
Right.
know the Islamic one
Right.
needs to be replaced, I think. You know, so we can look
But-
at that
yeah,
and then
yeah.
approach. I'm certainly willing to approach each one of the organizations and say, hey, what
Right.
are you willing to do to work with us? And I think we'll get some good support.
I think that covers Slot House. You have South Fowler House, that's a pocket park.
Well, I think it goes back to Bill and I have talked about, you know, what do we do, you know, that Indian Village, getting playground or getting something in there that as the residents are turning it over, I think we want to put something in that will make it a little bit more usable and enjoyable, right, Bill?
We should take a look at that, yeah.
We need to take a look at it. You know, and if we're considering other equipment, you know, like at Castle Point, you know, before when we were looking at Quiet Acres and so on, I think we got a good deal, didn't, you know,
Updated,
on
yeah.
2
Yeah, we got-
playground sets or what have you, so we should
Right.
be looking at that. Because quite, kind of honestly,
Down there on Fishkill line, off West Line. Fleetwood,
Yeah.
I don't have that on here, but,
Fleetwood's in better shape than most people think it is.
you know, we.
well, the playground equipment is pretty.
Right, well,
pretty
so I think
old.
we need to
Yeah.
go
That's
through
big.
these
Yeah.
several parks that have, were like Quiet Acres probably in past and are, and
Yeah.
then, you know, look at the, you know, playground
And
equipment
see
at
if we
least.
can buy in bulk.
Right? Yeah.
And that would save us money,
I
and
think,
Right.
and I
we-
think the
we-
families
we
would
need to do
appreciate
Yeah,
it.
they gave us a little bit of a price break last
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
Chris and Quiet Acres and maybe
Right.
Rockingham, they
Buy
gave
it
us
in
a little bit
bulk.
of a, not much, a couple
I agree.
$1,000, but if you get 2 or 3 of them,
Stop it.
something.
Well, let's not hire somebody from Tennessee this time.
Well,
Well, we didn't know the installer was.
Yeah.
We didn't know,
See, that's the
yeah.
problem.
But I think that should be a real priority on looking at that,
Hey,
not
so I
a great
do need a
expense.
favor. I do need that our field, our 4 dugout completed before opening day. They've asked me 4 or 5 times already. Gotta get it done. Gotta get it done. So we gotta find a vendor, but let's find
Yeah,
one
I
quick.
mean, we
because-
had it lined up, and,
I know. And now I just gotta get it done.
well, I wouldn't make any promises, because I don't, the
Well,
way
I
the
think-
market is right now, I don't see that.
Okay, you know, we don't make promises, but we need to have a plan to get it
Right,
done. I agree
exactly.
with that.
I'll get
you
on
know,
it, but
that's,
that is not a lot of time to work with.
I know.
No, I get it.
You know.
I get it. But every
But
time I
I'll
see
get
him,
on
they
it,
ask
I'll
me.
get on it.
No, I know.
I actually spoke with somebody recently about, you know, as a backup
Wow.
to the clay work, who has done work in there in the past, and they've been happy with him, so I'll throw that at him too and see if he's interested.
Yeah.
Yeah, see if they're
All we
interested
can
in
say is
taking it.
no.
Yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
just it, yeah. But, you know, again, it's, you know, there's still trouble getting materials, so.
Okay, so what we need, Steve,
get on it.
I think is, at our first meeting in March, you know, then to come back with us. Here are the priorities, the things that we've talked about, we
Well,
want to
I'd
see
like
done,
you
and
folks
then
to look
get the
too,
money.
in the meantime.
Well, that's fine.
And figure
yeah.
out what your priorities are, because
Well.
I can't get it all done at once, that's for sure.
No, I think we've given
And-
you, but we can come back with
Right.
our list, but we give you a
Let's
pretty good
figure out what we
idea.
need
I think
to
what we do is we set aside, maybe you can do this, you know, maybe 3, 4 projects that we think are up, all of us, each
Key,
one of us gets
yeah.
one. Key projects, get them started, and then kind of have a secondary, because there are certain ones that are probably going to take priority to get done than others. I mean, of course, everything we think is a priority, but we just want to make sure that we get certain projects, because we know there's certain needs that are going to come sooner versus
No,
later.
the spring sports, right?
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
Is where we have to put
Yeah.
Right.
top priority.
Yep.
And that, I mean, that does the sports, between the soccer and Little League, that's almost a full-time job for our department while they're in operation, just to keep their needs met.
So is the solution maybe to vendor some of the stuff out or, subcontract it out? I know it's more expensive, I get it,
Yeah.
you can do it significantly less expensive, but is that something we want to consider that, yeah, it's a little more expensive, but you've got so many things on your list here, you can't possibly get them all done, and we understand that.
Yeah.
So is it, and Bill's mentioned this a couple of times where, maybe you sub it out and you get it done so that we can, because again, you want to show residents you're getting things done,
Sure.
et cetera, and again, I know you've got, just a certain amount of work crew there, so again, I'm just looking to see how we can kind of ease the burden that you have, because you do have a lot of things here.
That is something to consider, but on that train of thought, also consider that every job we've contracted out here, we've had problems with. And I've had to spend almost as much time making repairs to the work that was already done and spending probably a third again of the money that we've already spent. The work that we do in-house here, we do properly the first time, and we don't have to go back. That is something that you need to put into the equation. I get pulled off of the work that we're supposed to be doing to make the improvements to go back and fix the stuff that we already paid for. And that is very frustrating to me. And I'm sure to you
Sure.
too.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So just keep that in mind as well, as part of the equation.
Okay,
That's about all I have.
thanks, Steve.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Steve.
Steve.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments that you'd like to make before we wrap up? I
Well,
think we covered-
actually, the COVID tests that people have been giving out, this is quick. The COVID tests that we've been giving out has been fantastic. People are very happy, but I'm going to explore putting them in our libraries and also in the post offices, because there's a lot of times where people are still working and they can't get here, and this will give them an opportunity to also get them. So I'll work with you.
Sure.
And I'll work with the, post offices, if anybody has any ideas or anything, to get these out to our residents. It would be better and beneficial, but that's one avenue I'm going to explore.
If any council member needs kits, let me know. We're going to have a lot of extra kits in the
Right.
next week, so if you want a number of
Yeah.
kids to service your constituents, let me know.
Todd was going to ask you for another box and masks. We need that. We're out of our supply here.
Yeah, we're expected to get
Yeah.
about 80,000 kits in the next week, which
Good.
my fear is that we're going to not be able to get them out to the communities,
Right.
and they expire in July.
Yeah.
So let's get them out.
Yep, we will.
Uh,
We've
if
been
I-
doing a good job distributing every day.
Yeah, no, I know the town's been doing a great job. Actually, pretty much every municipality's been doing a great job pushing them out. But again, prime example, right? So for me, my two kids were sick, right? Because one of them goes to daycare, so that's what happens. It becomes a petri dish.
Yeah.
So as soon as I started having symptoms, I took a COVID test just to make sure it was negative. And then the next day, which is today, I took another one. It's still negative. So it's good to have these kits so
Right.
that if,
Yep.
even if you get the common cold or you get anything, you can make sure that you don't have
Yes.
COVID, because COVID is still out there, and if you do have COVID, you should isolate. That
Thank
said,
you.
if I could just say one thing on the record here, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, Supervisor, Central Hudson has issued a statement today with respect to energy costs.
Yes.
And when Central Hudson makes a statement that they're alerting customers about significant
Yep.
temporary increases to both electricity and natural gas, that is a concern.
Yes.
And I
Exactly.
understand it's, Central Hudson is stating that this is caused by a number of other variables that you can read about on their website, but this is a situation that can have a real impact on folks that, it's going to have a real impact on
Well,
everybody.
especially
Everybody.
50%
I
or
mean, you're
more.
talking 46% increases
46,
on electric bills
50%.
and 19%
Natural gas.
on natural gas. That is significant. So, we just need to be aware of that situation, and hopefully this is a very temporary, moment, but it makes me nervous just reading this statement.
Yep, I agree with you fully.
Especially when people were told in November
Yes.
there was going to be a decrease,
Yes.
so.
Well, and the rates that were approved back last year were, a very small increase.
Yes. Cost of everything's going up now, so it's get passed on to the customer.
It is difficult
unfortunately.
times for
Yes,
everybody.
it
It is. It's very difficult.
Well, this is not
And
going to
if we
make it
can
any,
help,
it's not going to make it
exactly.
any easier.
It's not,
Hardly anyone, it will be easy on all of us
yeah.
in the town. It's
Exactly.
tough. Commercial, and it's gonna kill some small businesses.
Well, it's also gonna impact the town.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, that's what I'm saying.
You know, we budget based on
Yeah.
3 to 5 years previous, right? And, you know, whatever these variables are that they're pointing to, at the end of the day, it's going to affect the bottom line, not only for residential, commercial, but also government. So we need to be aware of that, and, you know, Central Hudson is stating that this is, you know, the delivery cost or whatever, not the supply cost. But nevertheless, it's still going to impact, and, you know, folks that are on fixed incomes, I don't know how they're going to manage this.
I don't either. Anything else, folks?
I want to thank the board. I think
Yeah.
we accomplished a lot.
Good.
The consultant
Yeah, thanks
Our
to the
legal?
staff too, and,
and our
Yeah,
engineer.
no, thanks for everybody. Thanks,
mean, our
Steve
planner.
and
I'm
Frederick
sorry.
for,
I'm
for the
tired.
support.
yeah,
And we should do these. I mean, this is a good session to have. I think it's excellent. I don't know if it's once a month or whatever, but I think it's
well, I think at
good
least,
thing to
you know, do another on projects for sure. We've talked about code changes. I think that would be a good chance rather than board meetings. And as I said, I want to make sure that we do cover these. You know, a lot of times I think Steve and others get frustrated as they think that we forget about it. And we do sometimes, but we need to get this, since we now have a good capital planning process, and thanks to Frederick, our financial planner, and the
Yes,
board,
Frederick, thank
we
you.
take it to
Thank
the
you,
next
Tom.
level, so we can have even more predictability in our planning. So, well, if there's nothing further, then do I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to
Second.
adjourn.
Okay, motion and
Everybody
second.
stay safe.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nays or abstentions, seeing none, motion passed. Thank you, everyone. Good night.